Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. It's time for Fight Night Picks with your hosts, Frank and Matt Allen.
We are back and primed for a busy week with Fight Night Picks. We're really looking forward to the card coming up this weekend. You have Alistair Overeem and Alexandre Volkov in the main event. And in the co-main event, Cory Sandhagen taking on the Iron Man, the answer, Frankie, Edgar. It should be a great card. And Matt, it was a weird one last time out, but we had question mark kicks. We had the event companion with UFC 257 for McGregor and Poirier 2. And what a cap off from the end of that one. Michael Chandler picking up a huge win.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Dustin Poirier picking up an even bigger win. Although Dustin Poirier didn't get a shout out from Ric Flair, but what does a shout out from Ric Flair mean in 2021? It's still pretty cool. So we look at this card, and overall, it is a great one. And there's a lot of fights that might be flying under the radar. There's a lot to really be excited about.
There really is, and this fight kind of kicks off the start of not really an official heavyweight tournament, but it does kind of feel that way. A lot of big high-level MMA high-level heavyweight fights on the horizon. We got, of course, Blades versus Lewis coming up. We've got Jairzinho versus Gane. It's a really exciting time in the heavyweight division, and this is the thing that I really like about this card. The co-main event is main event worthy. Cory Sandhagen just came off a main event headliner of his own, and a beautiful win over Marques, so it's nice that he's getting a quick turnover. I'm really excited for this card. I know the term dark horse gets thrown around maybe a little bit too much, but we do have two of the, I'd say, lesser known elites in the lightweight division in this card, with Diego Ferreira fighting Beneil Dariush. Just a really nice card top to bottom.
All sorts of great fights, a lot of ranked fighters as well, and not a lot of debuts, which is a bit of a surprise, especially with the cards that we've had over the past year, just under the circumstances. But the prospects that we do have on this card, a lot to get excited about. Matt, let's flip it over to our Fight of the Night candidates presented to you by Manscaped. With our Fight of the Night screen presented by Manscaped, make sure you head on over to the website, manscaped.com. Use promo code FNP. You're going to save 20% off your order. You're going to get free shipping at manscaped.com. Make your testies your besties. And Matt, while I will be talking about my nuts later on in the show, we have a rematch that's years in the making. You talked about it. Dark horses of the elite, really at lightweight. Carlos Diego Ferreira, better known as Diego Ferreira, taking on Beneil Dariush. And Matt, the last time these guys fought, Diego Ferreira was undefeated at the time. He ended up losing a decision to Dariush. Then he goes out there and gets knocked out by Dustin Poirier. He hasn't lost a fight since then. He's on a tidy little win streak. And for Beneil Dariush, he's really been all over the map. He's had a ton of fights since then. Definitely been the more active fighter out of these two with more wins. He's lost by finish, and all three of his losses have been by finish since then. But he's really fought a who's who of fighters as well.
When you fight the top guys in the division, listen, you're going to get your losses. But for Beneil Dariush, he's one of those guys who, again, I'm going to liken him to Gilbert Burns, where you look at his game as a whole and you're like, wow, he's a great grappler. He can wrestle really well, and his striking's come a super long way. It's just, he was never really able to put everything together. And this last little run that he's been able to go on, he's not just going out there and getting wins. He's getting finishes. And it's not like he's just going out and getting submissions, or he's limited only to getting knockouts. Beneil Dariush can get it done in either way. And we did see, so he armbars Drew Dober. He chokes out Frank Camacho, and then he's got two knockouts in a row in his last two wins. And Dariush and Ferreira, they're kind of in that Charles Oliveira category before Oliveira fought Kevin Lee, where it's, wow, these guys are on these really long win streaks, but they don't really have a marquee win when their opponent was at the peak of their power. For instance, with Dariush, he has a win over Drew Dober, but it was a little bit before Drew Dober's big coming out party at lightweight. And for Carlos Diego Ferreira, he beat Anthony Pettis at lightweight, but it wasn't the same showtime that we had kind of known and loved throughout his whole UFC career. So this is such an important fight for both guys, because I can't really tell you when the next chance either guy's going to get to fight someone in the top 10 of lightweight. It's unfortunate that they kind of have to kill each other off this weekend, but I'm extremely excited for this fight.
And if you look at Carlos Diego Ferreira, again, I talked about it. The activity really hasn't been there. Fought a couple times in 2019, fought once in 2020. Big win over Anthony Pettis, and that's definitely far and away the best win out of these two guys. It's a huge one. It was a statement win on a pay-per-view. It was the McGregor-Cerrone pay-per-view. And then we didn't get to see him. He was booked in a couple of contests. They fell through. For Beneil Dariush, though, again, if we're comparing our last wins, Beneil Dariush last win over Scott Holtzman. And you might think, well, Holtzman's not that great. But if you go back and watch that fight, Beneil Dariush looked absolutely amazing. Definitely on point in that one. That reason alone is why this is deserving of a fight of the night slot. And I think it could definitely win a bonus like that because we've seen it from Diego Ferreira. He's that jiu-jitsu guy, but he doesn't necessarily have to be the jiu-jitsu guy. He has really good takedown defense. He can really mess things up due to his level changes. You see that a lot in a lot of his fights. And his boxing just keeps getting better and better at Fortis MMA. And for Beneil Dariush training out of King's MMA, I mean, Rafael Cordeiro had one of the sneakiest 2020s that we can really speak about. I mean, minus Kelvin Gastelum. So everybody else has been really on point. Obviously, Marvin Vittori, Giga Chikadze, huge success stories there. Sean Strickland in the return, whether he's training out of Vegas or California, that remains to be seen. But for Beneil Dariush, definitely a great opportunity here. Likewise for Carlos Diego Ferreira. And a good way to start 2021 for these two.
Oh, 100%. Again, this wouldn't be Fight of the Night if we weren't excited for it.
All right, Matt, let's get into our second selection for Fight of the Night. When we started Fight Night Picks, it could have been Fight Night Picks, it could have been Flyweight Never Die. And in 2019, 2020, we've seen such a resurgence out of this division. All sorts of great names. The return of Brandon Moreno, Askar Askarov, Brandon Royval, Kai Kara France. The list goes on and on about all the exciting fighters that we've had added to this division. Insert Manel Kape, and this guy is such an interesting fighter because if you look at some of the losses on his record, Kyoji Horiguchi, great fighter, you know and love him. We're also talking about Kai Asakura and Ulka Sasaki. But if you look at Manel Kape's last 3 fights, all 3 of them second round finish wins back in 2019 en route to the Ryzen Bantamweight title. He's taken some time off. He had a couple of different fights booked for 2020. Unfortunately, his fight against Alexandre Pantoja back in December was moved. But fortunately, we get it on this card. Matt, for Alexandre Pantoja, coming in off the Ultimate Fighter, he is like hell on wheels. He's such an exciting fighter to watch. And it's like kill or be killed with this guy.
It really is. He does fight in that kind of Jimmy Manawa style where when you watch a Pantoja fight, he's either going to win by knockout or he's going to get wrestled a lot, to be completely fair, or he can get rocked. Like, that Devison Figueiredo fight versus Alessandro Pantoja is one of the greatest flyweight fights of all time. Those guys just go out there and say, I mean, we can't just brawl for 15 minutes, and it was such a high-level striking exchange between both guys. What I really like about Pantoja, too, he's got phenomenal boxing, but he goes to the body. He's not just a headhunter. He won't just go out there and try to brawl his way to victory. Now, I'm going to kind of counteract what I just said. His hands are really good. When he does like to stay technical, he's one of the better strikers in the division. He will brawl with his opponents, though, which makes him much more hittable than he probably should be. And the fact that they're matching him up with such a high-level striker like Manel Kape, who you know can go strike for strike with Pantoja in this fight, I'm as excited for this fight as I am for the main event. And let's be honest, if these guys weren't flyweights and you just had a guy who is at the excitement level of Pantoja against a outside the UFC champion, this could very well be the main event.
You gotta love this as far as matchmaking's concerned as well, because for Manel Kape, originally booked up against Bontarin, unfortunately Bontarin out of that fight. Kape waits a little bit longer, booked up with Pantoja. That fight falls out. And oh, by the way, along the way, Manel Kape weighed in as an alternate for one of the title fights between Brandon Moreno and Devison Figueiredo. That's how high level they think this guy is. Like, put him on the same pedestal as like a Michael Chandler at lightweight. I mean, he weighed in, coming from an outside organization with a belt wrapped around his waist. So this is going to be really interesting to see this fight, and it's definitely going to produce sparks for sure. So definitely 2 great fight of the night contenders, and I'm really looking forward to this card. What a fight card we have coming up, and I'm really looking forward to it. 2020 was amazing, all thanks to the Fight Night Picks fans. So make sure you cast your votes for Question Mark Kicks. That's a live show that starts 2 hours before the prelims. Here on YouTube, we have our voting up on our Instagram story. It's at Fight Night Picks. You can find me at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP. And oh, by the way, all of the great stuff from Fight Night Picks over on the website. It's fightnightpicks.com. We got the shop over there. The new Under Armour shirts are there. We've got the Under Armour hats. And, of course, the Fight Night Picks baseball jerseys. Who doesn't want a baseball jersey and a cap? Maybe you're hanging out on the couch. Maybe you're playing for a beer league team. It's a good look either way. So fightnightpicks.com. And Matt, I'm really looking forward to this card. As we always say, let's get into it. Big time fight at Bantamweight coming up this weekend as we have the lucky Timur Valiev coming in representing Mark Henry's and Nick Cantone MMA in New Jersey, taking on Hawaii's Martin Day. And I say short notice because originally Timur Valiev was matched up with none other than Julio Arce. And if you know anything about me, I get up for Julio Arce
yeah.
fight. So we wish Julio Arce nothing but the best. For Martin Day, though, coming into this fight, he's on a 3-fight losing streak. In his debut, he took on Liu Pingyuan, lost a split decision. It was a close fight. It was a really entertaining fight. Liu Pingyuan, there was some discussion, probably broke his hand in the second round of that one. But we saw a complete arsenal from Martin Day in that fight. So he comes out in his next time out. He takes on Davey, who's still in the Navy, Davey Grant. And whether or not he's a Billy Joel fan or not, that was a tough fight for Martin Day. I remember he was a big favorite in that one. Davey Grant catches him flush on the jaw and knocks him out cold. So Martin Day comes out his last time out. And again, you expect, is this guy really going to get off the schneid? He takes on Anderson Dos Santos. And Anderson Dos Santos, so far in the UFC, has been relatively underwhelming. Like, he's a big, powerful guy.
His record looks nice.
His record looks nice. You know his jiu-jitsu's there, but he just really couldn't string it together in the UFC. And then Martin Day got way too cocky with his grappling, and he ended up getting submitted in that one. So he's lost 3 in a row. First one by split, then knockout, then by submission. Really, the whole gamut. So that's Martin Day. Black belt in Taekwondo. Again, you can see flashes of where he's good. When he's on the ground, you know, he's creative, he's crafty, he's at least threatening with stuff. His takedown defense, pretty good. You can see the fundamentals of his takedown defense. They're there, spreading his legs, reaching for underhooks, trying to switch position, fighting the head. And then when he's on the feet, really dynamic with his strikes. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So let me just talk about Timur Valiev. This is a guy that a lot of people figured would be in the UFC sooner. And a lot of people liken him to a guy that he trains with that's fighting in the co-main event, Frankie Edgar, because his striking is so dynamic, but his wrestling's really there when he needs it. For me, Timur Valiev fights a lot like another Russian fighter that we saw debut who's a fair bit younger, in Umar Nurmagomedov. And if you go back and watch one of the PFL fights that Timur Valiev had, Boss Rutan talked about the fact that you're never going to see Valiev throw the same strike once in a fight, or twice, I guess I should say. This guy will throw an axe kick. He'll go to the body, then to the head, and then he'll throw a leg kick. Like, he's so crafty on the feet. And if you go back and see his UFC debut, he was originally scheduled to take on Jamal Emmers. Emmers was out. In steps a really tough out in Trevin Jones. And Matt, in that fight, it's considered a no contest. So some people might say, well, Timur Valiev's on an impressive win streak, and forget about that fight. It's a no contest. No. You got to go back and watch that fight. Because Timur Valiev looked amazing in the first round. He had Jones hurt. If it wasn't Chris Tognoni reffing, there might have been a stoppage in that first round. Body shot lands nicely. He follows it up with a great combo. Then he hurts Jones to the head. The second round starts. It's all Valiev. He takes his foot off the gas for all of about 2 seconds, and there's a check right hook by Jones that catches Valiev clean, and he was on Beach Street after that one. I mean, Tognoni had to pull him off of Jones. The reason why that's a no contest, Trevin Jones popped for a substance that USADA doesn't really care a whole lot about anymore. The UFC doesn't care a whole lot about anymore. Hell, California is going to give you a $100 fine if you get caught with it in your system. But Trevin Jones got caught for a little bit of that dank herb. And listen, the only thing he was at fault of in that fight, a little bit of the dank herb, but the platinum blonde hair did people wonders in 2020. Trevin Jones, when he comes back out this year, let's see what happens. But Timur Valiev, a really impressive fighter. I like this fight.
I have no idea where you want me to go off of what you just said, because you basically broke down both guys' entire career. Now, I agree with some of the praise you were giving Martin Day, but you were pumping his tires, let's say, way too much by the end of it. There's a reason he is 8-5 in his MMA record. You look at his skills as, again, if you just look at his individual skill set and you take away the performances from it, he is a good striker. He can strike with volume. He does have decent pop in his shots. But if you're a very offensive fighter who has good footwork, you can kind of stifle a lot of what Martin Day does. And I really like what you would say about Valiev. He'll throw same side shots, and it's not like he's always going to be, jab right hand or right left hook. He will like to throw like a right knee, right straight. He will throw kind of unorthodox combinations where at this level in the bantamweight division, it's really creative. And not only can you get away with it, it's actually going to pay massive dividends in your fights. It worries me a little bit once he does start to fight those upper echelon guys. And again, I'm trying to say take. I'm comparing Timur Valiev right now to like Jose Aldo, but still, these are the guys you do see them matched up with down the road in the future. I like Valiev's upside a lot more in this fight. I like how he can incorporate his wrestling, and I do think the Umar Nurmagomedov comp is a perfect one. It's interesting for Valiev because he does really need the threat of the takedown to open up his striking. And we talk about that all the time with Frankie Edgar. Now, of course, Frankie Edgar is kind of the perfected version of this fighter where he can just go out there and wrestle. He can just go out there and strike. And at this stage of his career, he can be the best guy at both. For Valiev, he does really need to incorporate the threat of the takedown, and Martin Day, he will allow you to do that. He does have a little bit of Zhalgash's Magulov in his game where if you even threaten the takedown, he almost defends it too early, if you will, where he's so conscious of the takedown attempt that he's going to sprawl immediately. And if Valiev can really start to make Martin Day worry about that takedown attempt, I'm not saying he has to go for it constantly and really chain wrestle to win this fight, but if you can just make Martin Day think, override his brain, again, always bring up the 2011 finals with LeBron, make Martin Day think, because the more he's thinking and reacting to what you're bringing to the table, the less he is going to let his striking and his Taekwondo game really expand throughout the fight. So for Valiev, he's really got to stick with that constant pressure. You can't let Martin Day just work in open space, and that's something we talk about with a lot of strikers. But for Martin Day specific, like he really needs the footwork aspect to really help his takedown defense too. So for Martin Day, I really think the keys going into this fight is if you see him on his bike a lot, really using his movement well to prevent the takedowns before they even happen. People say it, this is a classic Joe Rogan in jiu-jitsu where what's the best way to get out of a submission? Well, don't get put in it in the first place. For Martin Day, that really has to be his key. His game plan can't be, okay, what do I do once Valiev gets his hands clasped around me? He really has to use his footwork to avoid that position at all costs throughout the fight. I think he did a great job breaking it down, so really the only thing I have left to give is my prediction. And although Valiev is coming off a loss, if you will, whatever you want to consider it, I like his overall game quite a bit more than Martin Day's. Although I will agree with you, Day could catch him on the way in. He's got good knees. He does have good shots coming up the middle. He's not like Gabriel Benitez level of those inside up and down attacks, but he does have some things that can definitely stifle the attack of Valiev.
Here's the thing, for Timur Valiev, you're getting ready for a guy in Julio Arce that's a much more perfected version of a lot of guys that you're going to find kind of in and around the weeds. I'd almost say, 25 to 40, somewhere in there.
I thought you were about to say Julio Arce could beat any top 5 on his best.
Listen, well, I mean, he beat Danny Gay, but Julio Arce, I really do like. It's one of those guys that, like, it's odd, but he's in my Rolodex.
He's my Merson Tabora.
Julio Arce, pretty good fighter. Make sure you watch him. And I would have liked to have seen him fight Timur Valiev. Valiev got ready in a fight camp for a guy that can do a lot of the things that Martin Day does well in Jamal Emmers. He's a really tall guy for the weight class. Now, whether or not that fight was going to be a 45, whether it was going to be a bantamweight, I'm pretty sure, and I'd have to go back on my notes, I think that one was for featherweight. I should know it moving forward. But, you know, you look at that, and Valiev really had a tough fight ahead of him there.
He did.
But again, Jamal Emmers a little bit more leveled up. For Martin Day, though, again, the black belt in Taekwondo, he has a pretty good height advantage, going his way, about 4 inches of height. He has about 6 inches of reach. That's going to be a topic in a couple of our other fights here. We have some pretty big discrepancies in height and reach. If we have a look at this fight, though, in terms of the odds, none of them out because this one was just made official. The Tapology picks, 486 of them so far, 93% going with Timur Valiev to win, 39% by decision, 52% by knockout or TKO. What's the final takeaway on this fight?
So, for Timur Valiev, he is kind of lucky. He's going to fight an opponent who can't
That's
really
his
make...
nickname, you're right.
He is, but... He's lucky that he's fighting an opponent who won't make him pay for some of the lapses, I guess, really just in judgment throughout some of his fights. If he does stick to his game plan, I do really like him in this one. I see it more of a decision. I don't know if he will get the finish. You might be able to see sort of a ground and pound finish if Martin Day's the one who does get a little bit fatigued and you see Valiev passing guard, really making him pay for those ground exchanges, but I really like Valiev in this fight.
Matt, I like Valiev in this one again. You know, there might be some trepidation due to the fact that in his last fight, Timur Valiev was about a minus 600 favorite to beat Trevin Jones. Ended up losing that one. Again, it was just, he took his foot off the gas just for a moment in the second round. The other thing with Martin Day, there will be periods where he just kind of shores everything up. He takes his time, and that's when a guy like Timur Valiev can pounce. I would expect that Valiev comes out of the gates just absolutely stunting on Martin Day in this fight. And yes, I'm going with the Russian in this one. The first win for Nick Cantone MMA on the night. Let's see. We got some fighters coming in from New Jersey. Timur Valiev being one of them. Matt, we're both going with Valiev to pick up the win. Really looking forward to this card. We'll have Valiev's, I want to say corner man, but teammate Frankie Edgar taking on Cory Sandhagen. In the co-main event, we have Alistair Overeem taking on a really tough out in Russia's Alexandre Volkov in the main event. So Matt, as we always say with Fight Night picks, let's get into it. We have a great fight coming up at featherweight. Youssef Zalal coming in on short notice, taking on South Korea's Seung Choi. And Matt, while he's not like Steve Borden, he is a very impressive fighter. And for Seung Choi in the UFC, lost his first 2 fights to Valiev, then to Gavin Tucker, and then he picked up a big win over Stamann in a fight where he beat him pillar to post. And if he didn't grab the fence, probably would have got every single point available on the board. That fight, like, I can't stress how not close that fight was. And if you go back and watch it, Stamann was so confident in himself, even after getting the tar beaten out of him in the second round. Seung Choi looked amazing in that fight. Like, I have to say how good he looked, because it's just the truth. And if you look at the odds in this one, they're not overly close. I'm sure a lot of people might discredit Seung Choi. He is a 2010 bronze medalist at the World Muay Thai Championships, and you can see it in his fights. He's got a nice right straight down the pipe. He throws a nice kick, whether it's going head, body, or to the legs. He's a really dynamic fighter. When he gets to his back, he does have some issues. His takedown defense is so
shoddy.
I know if you go back and you watch the fight against Gavin Tucker, Joe Rogan talks about Seung Choi having good takedown defense. I remember the Mokhtarian fight, they talked about it a little bit. Valiev straight up one of the best wrestlers in MMA right now, so it's hard to really take a lot from that fight. And if you look at the fight against Gavin Tucker, he has his moments in the first round. In the second round, Tucker, illegal knee to the opponent. In the second round of the Valiev fight, same thing. Valiev hit him with an illegal knee. And for Seung Choi in his fight against Stamann Mokhtarian, he grabbed the fence. So in every fight he's had so far in the UFC, somebody's lost a point. And in this one, Youssef Zalal, like I said, he's coming in on short notice. And it's really interesting because you had Seung Choi. He was booked to take on Ocho Steven Peterson. Peterson out of the fight. Then Colin Anglin was supposed to make his UFC debut. Well, now he's out. Now you get Youssef Zalal at a Factory X, who in his last fight took on a short notice opponent in Ilia Topuria, and it did not go well.
It really didn't. And again, Topuria, I would say we're 2 of his bigger fans out there. This was before anyone really knew how good Topuria was. And the fact that he went out there and it was a great fight against Zalal, I must say. It was back and forth, but again, when you don't know how good a guy is, and then the unknown sort of shows up and dominates the guy who you had a lot of stock in, and I thought Youssef Zalal was going to dominate him. I really did. I was high on Zalal. He's great.
Do we want to go back as to who we picked in that one?
No, we probably don't. But it's just Zalal, when you look at what he's able to do, he's so well-rounded, and I understand he had some back-to-back losses right before he came into the UFC, but the run that he was on was really, really significant, and I really like Youssef Zalal for this purpose. There's a lot of prospects where you look at them and it's like, wow, they've got a bunch of first-round knockouts. Look how good they are. Youssef Zalal tends to just dominate his opponent for 15 minutes. And again, some people aren't going to like this, but you have a pretty good idea as to what Youssef Zalal brings to the table at this point. And I wouldn't really put him in that Ramzan Abiv category where it's his goal in fighting is, I'm going to win a decision. I'm going to win a decision. Youssef Zalal goes out there, throws big power, has good takedowns. It's not like he's not fighting for the finish. I just always get a lot of tape, I feel like, when I see Youssef Zalal fight. He got outboxed by Ilia Topuria, though.
Oh, he got taken down a lot.
Taken down a ton. That's not going to happen against Seung Choi. He is against a completely different stylistic matchup, and this fight is going to make for absolute fireworks. That's another great thing I like about this fight. Short notice fight, but this could have been nominated for Fight of the Night. If we really wanted to, like, this could have been on the graphic at the start of the video. That's how excited I am for it. Here's the problem with Seung Choi, and you had kind of hinted on it. If he gets backed up, he doesn't have bad takedown defense, but he's only really good for that first move. He's kind of Alexander Gustafsson-ish, where if you go on his hips, he's got really reactive hips. He's good for that initial takedown defense, but if you are a guy like Valiev, and he did it to perfection against Wu Choi, or Gavin Tucker, and Tucker sort of figured it out as the fight went on, Gavin Tucker couldn't get the takedown when he's just going for single takedowns. And then he goes, oh, I can chain wrestle. And Seung Choi can defend some of the initial shots, but you can tell that as those sequences start to progress and they do get into that 2, 3, 4 takedown attempts off the one shot, he will start to struggle. And I don't know if it's a balance thing with him. And I gotta say this too. He stands very much like an orthodox Jeff Neal. He does have a very upright stance in that way, and he does love to fire out that right hand. He's good at making guys pay for the takedown attempt, but again, if you are really dedicated to it, you will be able to, and I hate to use this term, you'll be able to break him, sort of, where you will be able to take him down, he'll work his way back up to the feet, but if you do that enough to him, he will just sort of accept the takedown. So if Youssef Zalal goes out there and really fights the best of his ability, I would expect a very takedown-heavy game plan. But he will stand and strike with Seung Choi, and that's what worries me a little bit for Zalal in this fight.
For Youssef Zalal, again, training at a Factory X with guys like Alexandre Hernandez and the like, I think that's definitely going to help you out in this fight. And obviously, he wouldn't be confident, or he wouldn't not be confident in his skills if he didn't take this fight on short notice. So you look at it for all that it's worth. Youssef Zalal, again, the ceiling's quite high, only 24 years old. But again, for Seung Choi coming in the UFC, he was one of those guys that had a lot of first-round finish wins when he went down through. Obviously, in most of his fights, he was at a bit of a disadvantage in terms of overall cage time. That's one of those things that you kind of scratch your head at a little bit. And again, the level of competition. Movsar, probably a future top 15 guy.
He's all right.
Gavin Tucker. On his best day, he is, and if he fights a lot, he definitely is. I mean, you look at his last two fights, Billy Quarantillo, Justin James, looked amazing. And then if you have a look at Seung Choi's last fight against Suman Mokhtarian, well, Mokhtarian fought twice in the UFC. He lost twice in the UFC. And he hasn't fought since he fought Seung Choi. And that was 13 months ago. So it's really tricky to try and get an accurate read. Whereas for Youssef Zalal, so far in the UFC, fought Austin Lingo, and he looked great. And then in his next fight, Jordan Griffin. And that was the one where I worried a lot about his takedown defense, his submission defense. It was a closer fight than maybe just a unanimous decision on a page might say, but he did fight quite well in that one, and it's one of those ones where Youssef Zalal has a lot of success all the way around the cage. I don't worry about him a lot now. That's going to contradict a little bit with the Ilia Topuria fight, but when he's got his back up against the cage, he can usually circle out of it. And when he's got a guy against the cage, well, I don't worry about him in a clinch all that much. For Seung Choi, when he's got somebody backed up against the cage, he has all kinds of success, and his clinch game is great. Again, I can't stress enough that Muay Thai background. You're going to see it in this fight. You're going to love it if he lights it up. So for Youssef Zalal, beats Griffin, has that fight against Lingo in his debut. Then he fought Peter Barrett and just made Peter Barrett look silly.
That's a weird fight.
Chase Hooper had a fight against Peter Barrett. It was fun. It was fun, I guess.
Submission.
Peter Barrett had good opportunities, I guess. Really lit Chase Hooper up on the feet at certain points, but Youssef Zalal looked great in that Peter Barrett fight. And then again, unfortunately for him, lost to Ilia Topuria. So Matt, let's have a look at the Topology picks here. 793 of them so far, 88% Zalal. And of the people that are going with Zalal, 82% predicting him to win by decision. Zalal open to minus 150 favorite. He's now minus 241. For Choi, open to plus 130, now a plus 190. What are you thinking about that?
I like Zalal in this fight. I'm kind of surprised by the confidence in which Tapology voters have voted in his favor. Because again, this fight's going to be close. And it's the thing with Zalal. It's not that he'll fight to the level of his competition, but he's not a big finisher. He's a great striker, but he doesn't have massive pop behind his shots by any means. So Choi's not going to go out of there early. And if you do stand and strike with Seung Choi for any period of time, and let's be honest, this is probably going to be a 15-minute kickboxing fight, there are going to be opportunities for him to catch you. I still like Zalal just for his ability to mix it up. He got out-wrestled by Topuria. He got really out-volumed by Topuria as well, but those aren't issues that he's going to run into in this fight, I don't think. So I'm going to pick Youssef Zalal. And again, a guy at only 24 years old is going to get better after every single fight. And I think after losing to a guy like Topuria in his last fight, is really going to light a fire under him, and we should see the best Youssef Zalal.
I like Youssef Zalal a lot. Again, I talked about all the tricks of the trade, all the things that he does really well. But the same thing can be said for Seung Choi. And you look at both of these guys, well, with a loss for Youssef Zalal. Well, he won his first three, and he lit the world on fire to start, and then his 2020 ended a little bit poorly. But if he didn't lose that fight, he'd probably be in that Rookie of the Year type conversation for the last year. So if he loses a fight to Seung Choi, all right, back to the drawing board, you're going to get more fights. But if Seung Choi loses, I get that he won his last fight, but again, remember what I said about Suman Mokhtarian. We haven't seen him since, lost 2 in the UFC, didn't win on The Ultimate Fighter, so it's a tricky one. So for Seung Choi, this to me feels like a must-win, and it sucks for him where you go from Steven Peterson to Colin Anglin, now to Youssef Zalal, probably the toughest test out of those three. Yeah. You really got to feel for a guy like that. And the other thing, I like the power of Seung Choi. I get it. He didn't knock out Suman Mokhtarian, but he came this close to doing it in that second round, and he beat the brakes off him during that entire fight. So this is a really tricky one for me. In terms of confidence level in this card, Not one of the most confident picks, but I
agree.
do like Youssef Zalal in this one, especially if he's able to really kind of trick Seung Choi with a little bit of those wrestling feints. And if he can do that early, I really think it's going to help him on the feet. So I like Zalal here. You like Zalal here.
100%.
And I'm really looking forward to this fight. We have a very, very active division here at featherweight. This should be a great fight. We've got a great card coming up, and you're not going to want to miss the video at the top. Overeem taking on Volkov. It's a heavyweight banger, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. Great fight coming up at women's bantamweight, and this is a division that really needed an infusion of talent. And listen, my favorite part of Fight Night Picks is going in and looking at these up-and-coming fighters that we get to see either popping up on the regional scene or finally getting their shot on the big stage. Joselyne Edwards was one of those fighters just, 3 weeks ago. She had an opportunity to take on a very interesting test in Wu Yanan, replacing Betch Kohea. And we had the conversation in that prediction video, is Joselyne Edwards as good as Betch Kohea? And it was one of those kind of head-scratching questions. Joselyne Edwards definitely answered a lot of questions in that fight, because if you went back and watched her regional tape, she had a ton of power, incredibly aggressive, really nice kicks to the body, to the thigh, to the calf, and to the head. And that's one of those things that you don't really see established all that much in MMA. You see that the calf kick is in vogue, and that's the hot new thing. You don't really see a lot of thigh kicks because of the threat of the takedown. But still, if you look at Joselyne Edwards' fight against Wu Yanan, out of her total strikes, 50% to the head, 26% to the body, 23% to the legs. And really, that fight against Wu Yanan gave you an idea of pretty much everything that Joselyne Edwards has done on the regional scene. Less a knockout, really. So she did look great in that fight. I know in the first round, probably Wu Yanan won it, and we disagree on the way that we saw the fight.
I agree with everything that you've said so far about Joselyne Edwards. And here's the thing. I do think she is one of those super prospects, if you will. Like, I see her as... She's not going to get the hype, of course, that Macy Barber had, but I think skill level, she has a similar ceiling. My issue with the Wu Yanan fight is when Edwards looked good in that fight, she looked great. The issue is there was a couple moments, it seemed like in every round, where she just couldn't get a good read on her opponent, if that makes any sense, where Yanan would just be in open space kind of moving, and Edwards wouldn't do anything. She just kind of stand there and wait for her opponent to do something. I agree with a lot of what you said. Again, I like her volume. I like how dynamic her striking game is. She landed a beautiful front kick in that fight. She lands a lot of really nice head kicks as well. It's just she can get sort of caught off guard, where you can trick her with a takedown, and if you do mix it up a lot, I think there might be some holes in her game that we just weren't able to see exposed by Wu Yanan. But it's going to be interesting to see her development moving forward, because I do think Edwards just technically is one of the better strikers in this division, really in either division that she chooses to compete in, whether or not we do see her bantamweight or flyweight. I like her striking technique. It's just weird, because I expected her to have more pop in the end of her shots against Yanan. She does kind of set up her power strikes, and when fighters do that, you do expect that last punch to have a big, pop at the end of it. And for Edwards, she would land that big strike, and then she'd just kind of go back to playing the volume game. It's not that I dislike the striking of Edwards. It's just very unique, I guess. It's something that I haven't grown accustomed to, and it does worry me, because I'm going to compare everyone till the day I die to either Valentina Shevchenko or Amanda Nunes. Here's my issue with Joselyne Edwards. She's a good striker, but I don't see her outstriking the good strikers in her division, especially at bantamweight. And on the ground, I think she's great defensively, but I would love to see her at least shoot for more takedowns. And if we do see that in Karol Rosa, I'm willing to jump on that hype train. I just think I need to see one more great performance from her until I am really dedicated.
So if we look at Joselyne Edwards, she's trained a little bit. I know a lot of people were kind of like, what? She's training like Iowa? What was up with that? Because she's, of course, from... And I gotta do it again. Panama! So Joselyne Edwards getting that big win for Panama last time out. But again, working her striking with King's MMA. We saw her in the camp of the Shevchenko sisters ahead of their last appearance on the same card. So for Joselyne Edwards, again, the striking's her bread and butter. Her takedown, defense, and offense has been a little bit, I don't know, it's a work in progress, I guess I should say. She's on the national boxing team for Panama as well. So, again, that's her strong suit. For Karol Rosa, coming out of Pajana Valetudo with names like Jessica Andrade. And again, we've seen it from Karol Rosa, her 2 fights in the UFC, the fight against Lara Procópio, who's also on this card. That was a split decision win. They went tit for tat pretty much all fight. Karol Rosa mostly dominated it. If you look at the numbers, they're really close, but Rosa really, kind of took the tide from the start, and it was a Rosa fight from there on out. And the nice thing that she did in that fight, it was just a lot of lands in combination. Then in the fight against Vanessa Melo, it was a lot of fluidity on the feet, but she mixed in the takedowns as well. Really put on a great performance in that fight against Vanessa Melo. The only thing there is, oh boy, how good's Vanessa Melo? Not that great.
No.
Not that great. So that's what I've got.
Okay, this fight's really interesting because I do think the best version of this fight is a super high-level kickboxing fight where Joselyne Edwards is going to go out there, land good leg kicks, go to the body, really work in her different ranges of striking. Karol Rosa, again, she's a phenomenal striker, but she has the size and the strength advantage, and I don't see her going for a lot of offensive takedowns. But she can just negate everything Joselyne Edwards does by holding her up against the cage. And we even saw Wu Yanan was able to do that to Edwards. And that was really the only pause in the striking of Edwards. Again, she just had those sort of weird periods in her fights where she'll just kind of be stationary and wait for the fight to come to her. But she is able to be held up against the cage. And it's not to the effect of like a Carlos Condit, for instance, where like, oh, that's how you beat this person. It hasn't been that big of a glaring hole, at least yet. But Karol Rosa, with her size advantage in this fight, if they're about 50-50 on the feet, or even if Edwards is able to gain a little bit of success, I do see Rosa just being able to play the wet blanket game and hold her up against the cage to either A, get a rest for herself, or just to sort of cool down the striking of Edwards.
And you got to kind of talk a little bit more on the size advantage for Karol Rosa, because if you just look at the numbers, I understand what you mean, but if you just look at the numbers, height definitely falls to Joselyne Edwards, reach certainly falls to Joselyne Edwards. But Karol Rosa just has that low center of gravity, and especially with the stance that she has, she keeps her hands nice in front of her. She really throws. She'll go 1, 2, and then the low kick. She's always working that inside leg kick. That's a really good way to stop your opponent. I know with Procópio, didn't really work out all that well. And with Vanessa Melo, again, I've talked too much about Vanessa Melo to start 2021. We talked about her at length in the Sarah Morris fight. We picked it wrong because Sarah Morris decided not to wrestle. But Vanessa Melo is the random Marcos type where her hands are always out and she's always doing something. Like Cindy Dandois, that's the name that we always compared her to. But in that fight, again, Karol Rosa worked the takedowns to great effect and really put together a great game and really got people excited about a fighter that's just coming into her own at 26 years old. I know she has 16 pro fights and a fair bit of time off between some of them. I know if you go back and watch the fight against Giselle Moya and then the fight against Procópio, it was bang, bang. But then she took a lot of time off, about half a year between the Procópio fight and the Vanessa Melo fight. And if you look at Karol Rosa too and her record on the regional scene, and both these women, I should say that really, lost to Giselle Moya, so she has the rematch wins. Larissa Pacheco, that we know and love. Melissa Gatto, who, when are you going to fight in the UFC, Melissa? She's had so many fights booked so far. And for Joselyne Edwards, again, her last loss coming to Sarah Alpar that has had a fight in the UFC that didn't go all that well. But still, she's taken on a decent level of competition. A little bit of an asterisk, but decent level of competition there. Obviously, the loss to Alpar against a really high-level wrestler in this division. So if we talk about the odds, Matt, in this one, Rosa opened a minus 205. She's now minus 203 for Edwards, plus 175, plus 168 or so on best fight odds. Tapology picks 797 of them so far. You got 58% on Rosa with 88% of voters picking her to win a decision. I love this fight. Again, it's great to have women like this in this bantamweight division, just an added infusion of talent. It should be a great fight. What are your final takeaways here?
So, again, this should be a phenomenal fight. I like what you said about the leg kicks of Rosa, and I'm really curious to see, A, if there's enough power behind them to really accumulate on Edwards, and how the movement of Edwards is affected by those leg kicks. Edwards, someone, she does like to move a lot on her feet. She will set up her strikes with her footwork, so it will be interesting, especially if Rosa's able to invest in them early. How is Edwards going to look in that third round? Because we did see her start to tire a little bit against Wu Yanan, so now you're adding the fact that you're fighting a much bigger opponent in Karol Rosa, who probably will be using her weight to kind of bring the fight to you and weigh on you a little bit. I like the long-term game of Karol Rosa, and I do like her in this fight. Now, here's the thing, little, I guess, side mark, if you will. Joselyne Edwards is the higher ceiling out of these two. I just think her natural weight class is 125 pounds. I think this is one of those cases, like when Gabriel Benitez fought Morales at 155 pounds, where you have a good fighter who's moving up into an unnatural weight class, and their performance will be affected a little bit by it. I like Edwards a lot at 125. At 135, I understand she's tall and rangy for the weight class, but against some of these fighters, they will be able to hold her up against the cage, I do think, so that's just something you should watch out for.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you look at Joselyne Edwards, she's had fights at 25, she's had fights at 35. I think physically she looks great at 135 pounds. It's a tricky one to try and break down because she has a lot of muscle for this division, which isn't always something that you see. And I like the comparison as well. You know, we've had a lot of fighters that, you know, in certain opportunities, they have to move up a weight class, and it just does not work out. And then you have fighters that move down. I mean, Omar Morales when he fought Giga Chikadze,
Yeah, he moved down,
it does not work well. So for Joselyne Edwards, again, very high ceiling. I like the volume of Karol Rosa, and I like the threat of the takedown here and how well she can mix her wrestling in with her grappling, because she's a good wrestler, but a great grappler. And I think those hand in hand with the fact that she can volume strike, you know, the power definitely sides with Joselyne Edwards. We showed the highlight in the prediction video for the Wu Yanan fight, and we put out the video of her fight against Pamela Gonzalez from back in July of last year. Go back and watch it, please, because the combination that she lands and the power with which she lands, the body kick stuns Gonzalez, who falls down, and that's the end of the fight. And it's amazing stuff to see. So in this fight, if Joselyne Edwards is going to win, I don't think she's going to be able to out-volume Karol Rosa. She's going to have to hurt her and possibly finish her in this one. But for Karol Rosa, she can win a decision. She can win by submission. So we'll see what happens in this one. I'm ever so slightly siding with Karol Rosa, but I'm keeping my money in my pocket for this one. It is a pop and popcorn fight if I've ever seen one, and I just love the matchmaking in this one. So, Matt, we're both going with Karol Rosa to get the win. Really looking forward to this one. As far as this bantamweight division is concerned, Matt, at the top of the card, we have a great fight coming up between Alistair Overeem and Alexandre Volkov. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. What an exciting fight we have at a catchweight of 140 pounds. We have the Jamaican sensation, Ode Osborne, taking on Psycho, Denise Bondar. And Matt, that Bondar name for Canadians really brings back great, vivid memories. I mean, the first Canadian female in space, maybe the first neurologist in space, Roberta Bondar of Ukrainian descent.
Stand up.
Holy smokes. But Matt, if you look at Denise Bondar, this guy is a ball of energy. I mean, 14-2 total record. And listen, I gotta let this one, cat's out of the bag early on in this video. These guys have not taken on the highest level of competition throughout their careers. For Ode Osborne, he did in his last fight against Brian Kelleher, but he got finished in that fight. And for Denise Bondar, it is full of salt. This is salted beef at the best. But I look at the way that he finishes fights. And that's the thing. We talked about that when Michael Chandler took on Dan Hooker. Maybe it's not necessarily the level of competition. It's how you're going out there and performing.
Important point.
And if you go through his last number of fights, he's on an 8-fight win streak. First round triangle choke, third round rear naked, first round knee, first round punches. And then you go back and you look at the way that this guy fights, and it's weird. Because if you watch him strike, he can kind of go from both stances, a whip knees up the middle. He's pretty, I wouldn't say lackadaisical with his striking, but he knows how good his ground game and his wrestling is, and that's why he can kind of get a little bit creative with his hands. You look at his last number of fights. The road to WWFC fight his last time out against Kanan Jafarli. That was a weird one because, you know, he just pretty much did whatever he wanted. And when he gets that fight down to the mat, I've seen him get into really compromising positions. And if you really want to get a comparison between Denise Bondar's last number of opponents and Ode Osborne, it's the fight against Kevin Jacques. And at the time, Jacques was 7-1. I went back and looked at this guy's record too because, again, you want to see how good he is. He was born in the year 2000. He's younger than Matt.
By almost 2 years.
And he was taking on a guy that had a lot of, fights. He was 7-1 at the time, Kevin Jacques. He takes down Denise Bondar. He gets his back at one point. Like, he gets Bondar in some pretty bad spots. Now, Bondar ends up winning by a second-round arm triangle. And the way that he passes from guard to half guard to side control, and then he gets into the submission, you can tell how high level this guy is. Again, we talked about this in our pre-fight analysis. He's one of those guys that he'll put a knee on your shoulder to try and get into crucifix. He'll go knee on body to try and switch positions. when he gets down on the ground, he is not like a Jake Shields. He's always trying to advance position.
A Cody Stamann.
That's why Denys Bondar is such an exciting guy to watch. And I'm overly, excited about this one because for Ode Osborne, he finishes fights too. He's coming out of Pura Vida, BJJ, and he has a great guy in his corner. And you might say, Craig, you're crazy, but with Jamie Simmons in his corner, I know his fight on short notice against Giga Chikadze, he didn't look all that good. But his wrestling credentials are very good. And Zach Otto from that gym and Montel Jackson from that gym, they're going to get Ode Osborne ready for a good fight. And again, his level of competition, not all that great coming into the UFC. The wins 3-7, 3-8, 4-1, and then 5-1 Armando Villarreal on Contender Series 2019 to punch his ticket against Brian Kelleher. But overall, Ode Osborne, unorthodox striker, pretty slick on the ground. He does get submitted, though.
Ode Osborne, if you just look at his striking, he's a really fluid striker. He can fight from both stances. And what I really like about Ode Osborne, you don't see it from a lot of fighters. Anthony Pettis is a guy who does this. He's always the first one that comes to mind. His stance changes on what his opponent's stance is. He'll always do the opposite of what his opponent does. If you're an orthodox fighter, he'll stand southpaw because he has a great read on his back power kick, and that always just really opens up that position. So if you do see, really, I just love the fact that he is fluid from both positions. It's weird because Ode Osborne is a much better fighter than he was able to show in his UFC debut. And he did not look good against Brian Kelleher. And I always remember Brian Kelleher as that guy who, he's on the prelims, he might win a fight, he might lose a fight, but he's always going to have an exciting fight. Losing to Brian Kelleher by guillotine, there is no shame in that whatsoever. He is very Nick Lentz-esque, where even Nick Lentz can get the best fighters in the world in that one position. And for Brian Kelleher, he shares that same one position. His guillotine is absolutely phenomenal. Ricky Simone, if you're watching, take some notes. Ode Osborne, his striking looked really good against Brian Kelleher at the start of that fight. And then he goes for, I don't want to say it's the dumbest takedown ever, because there's definitely dumber takedowns out there, but it might be nominated for the award. He shoots on a guy known for his really good head and arm chokes from a defensive position. Not the greatest show of fight IQ from Ode Osborne, but I do really think his striking is high level. I love the fact that he can go both stances. He throws really nice straight shots from both stances as well. And it's weird because people talk about it. Daniel Cormier talked about it with Dustin Poirier, where he's a southpaw, but he is right-handed. It just gives both sides a lot of power. Ode Osborne has pretty good power from both sides. It's not like he can just stun people with his right hand and he'll just switch his stance around that fact. He's good from both sides. He does really mirror his stance well. The issue is with his wrestling. He gets taken down a lot. Now, here's the great news for Ode Osborne. He's developed a decent submission game off of his back, and it is really weird, too. Talk about how good of a striker he is, how dynamic his striking is. He has a lot of wins by submission, and you do see this a lot, especially on the regional scene. Carlos Condit's the best example of this. Go back and look at Carlos Condit's earlier record. All of his wins are by submission. It's like triangle chokes, guillotine chokes. When you're a really, really good striker, especially on the regional scene, and you haven't been able to really get a high-level takedown defense to complement your striking, you're going to get taken down a lot. And for Ode Osborne, he figured out, well, if guys keep on taking me down, I'll just get a good guillotine myself, and I'll have a good triangle choke. So I do like what Osborne offers up off his back from a defensive and really an offensive setting as well. I'm just curious as to what Denys Bondar, what his game plan is going to be coming into this fight. Because we do know Osborne can get caught off of his back, even though he is somewhat good offensively from there. But I would say that the strength of Osborne 100% is his striking. Whereas Bondar, he can switch it up a little bit. I don't know if Bondar wants to just go out there and strike with Ode Osborne, though. He is going to have to mix in the takedown at some point. Because even Osborne, again, his record's sort of salty. If you just look at the Kelleher fight, you're thinking, well, this guy's not very good. He's a high-level striker, and that does worry me for really anyone in the division.
It's a really tricky fight to get a read on. So when I had to look at the odds, honestly, I was a little bit surprised. And again, these guys have taken on bad fighters on the regional scene. I can't stress that enough. So in terms of a confidence level, probably not the most confident. And that might sound like a weird thing for me to say because I love to research prospects like this, and I had a hard time trying to get a read off of Denys Bondar. Again, 14-2 total record, 8-fight win streak, all kinds of finishes. But normally I can pick up on something that really wins the prospect over. This is a huge hole. This guy has great takedowns, but he gets hit on the feet and he gets taken down. Now, is it one of those circumstances, like you said, where he gets taken down and he knows how good his ground game is? I think it's a little bit of that, and he's gotten out of some of those compromising positions. But at the same time, these are low-level regional guys, and they're kind of setting them up a little bit in a lot of these circumstances. So I do like what I'm seeing out of Denys Bondar, and I think a win over Ode Osborne really raises his stock a lot. Whereas for Ode Osborne, you beat Denys Bondar, it's kind of like, okay, cool. Well, like,
You're still in the UFC.
You're still in the UFC, but you're probably gonna have to fight another guy like Denis Bondar to really win you over. You got to get more of those wins. So Ode Osborne definitely in a bit of a weird spot, especially since losing to a known commodity in Brian Kelleher. Jimmy Rivera knows him well. And if I look at Denis Bondar, it's a lot of question marks. So if you look at the odds again, like I said, they don't make a ton of sense to me because Osborne opened a plus 140. He's now a plus 146 for Denis Bondar. Opened minus 180. He's now minus 174. And if we have a look at the Tapology votes, there are a lot of them on this one. 1,065, 78% Bondar, 66% have him to win by submission. What do you think about that?
I am going to side with Denis Bondar in this. If his ground game is as good as I think it is, he should be able to take advantage of the poor takedown defense of Ode Osborne. Again, the reason Ode Osborne has so many submission wins is because he's getting taken down on the regional scene. And against a wrestler of Bondar's, well, I guess his level, if you will, he should be able to dominate Osborne on the mat. Here's the thing, though. Ode Osborne is not given the respect he deserves on the feet in this fight. I think he could catch Bondar at some point. But the more confident pick, I should say, is Denis Bondar.
I had to look at some of the props on this one. And again, talking about the odds being, somewhat salacious, but a little odd. The prop for a submission win by Bondar, plus 180. For him to win inside the distance was plus 140. And for Denis Bondar, he's going to be the fourth Ukrainian fighter in the UFC. Nikita Krylov, Alexandre Daskalchuk, and Marina Moroz, Matt. So kudos to Denis Bondar. I'm also going with him as well. But again, in terms of, methods of victory, Denis Bondar, good wrestling, really active on the ground. I think that's going to help him out in a fight like this. But for Ode Osborne, I've seen him in certain fights. The Villarreal fight was one of them where he keeps his hands really low. He's always moving his hips, switching stances. He's ready for that takedown attempt, or he knows it's going to be coming. And he's always looking for something. And he's got a good whip on the end of his shot, so he could catch Bondar from range. He's most likely going to have a reach advantage in this one, and he does have a height advantage as well. Again, this fight is an odd catch weight at 140 pounds. So in this one, we're both going with Denis Bondar to get the win. And I'm really looking forward to this one. This should be a good one, and it's a great card. Co-main event, you got Sandhagen taking on Frankie Edgar, and in the main event, Alistair Overeem taking on Alexander Volkov. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. If you're an OG fight fan, you're going to get up for a fight like this. We have Michael Johnson taking on Clay the Carpenter Guida. Matt, I remember when we got into MMA, 2008, 2009, Clay Guida was at the height of his powers. He beat Anthony Pettis, who was coming in from WEC as a champ, and he stole all that thunder away from him. And since then, it's been a mixed bag. But Clay Guida at 39 years old is still hanging out, still putting on halfway competitive fights. And he's one of those guys that, listen, you don't want to turn the TV off if Clay Guida's making the walk. He's always doing something. He's bouncing around. His hair's going everywhere. He loves the game. He is taking on a guy who might not be 40, but all of a sudden, he's a man.
Oh, overnight he became one.
Because Michael Johnson isn't the menace anymore. I'll put the picture up. He put a thoughtful post up on Instagram. We're getting rid of the menace nickname. It took 3 losses and 35 pro fights to get rid of the nickname the menace. And Matt, for people that don't know Michael Johnson, he starched Dustin Poirier. He beat Tony Ferguson by decision. And he beat the tar out of Edson Barboza.
So we're talking about one of the greatest lightweights of all time, right?
Well, he lost to Khabib, and he's lost 3 in a row. And that's a weird thing with Michael Johnson. He lost to Josh Emmett by knockout. And by now, you're probably thinking, well, okay, Josh Emmett has a ton of power. Michael Johnson was beating Josh Emmett until he got knocked out. And that's easy to say, too, but it was late in the fight. Michael Johnson is the most frustrating fighter in the world. So he fights Stevie Ray, and you're thinking, man, Michael Johnson's getting off to a pretty good start. And then he doesn't.
Just stops.
And then Stevie Ray wins. And then he's fighting Thiago Moises in the most disappointing fight I've ever seen in my entire life. He beat Thiago Moises easy in the first round. Thiago Moises goes for a takedown in the second. Michael Johnson goes, well, all right then, I guess. I won't really fight this.
I'll give this grappling thing a try.
And Thiago Moises submits him because Moises, one of the most accredited Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts you're going to find in this division.
Weird how that works, isn't it? You get taken down by a BJJ black belt and you get submitted. Michael Johnson, frustration really just is the first thing that comes to mind. Because again, when it's right, it is right. You've got a southpaw, really heavy-handed boxer who's got phenomenal hand speed, a really good wrestling, offensive and defensive wrestling game, and decent cardio. The version of Michael Johnson that we've been getting, though, and really, I always use the person's nickname when they're good. Like, Michael Bisping was the last guy to fight the Spider, Anderson Silva, and we've just seen Anderson ever since that. Michael Johnson should have got rid of that nickname immediately after the Khabib loss, and I don't know if that loss just took something out of him, and it's really weird because you can't always point to a single fight that has completely changed someone's career. With Roy McDonald, you can look at... I always look at the second Robbie Lawler fight. You can kind of look at the first Douglas Lima fight as well, even though he won that. It's just two fights where he's taking a tremendous amount of punishment. And this is more of a boxing term than it is anything that's used in MMA. But in boxing, we see this a lot, where a guy, it'll be like a corner stoppage, his corner has to throw in the towel, and he's never the same again. Not only is he never the same again, he might never fight again, because it's such a mental hurdle of, okay, I got beat this bad by this guy. Like, how do I ever really get back to the pinnacle of the sport? I don't know if that happened to Michael Johnson when he fought Khabib, but it was such a demoralizing loss. If you go back and watch that fight, listen, a lot of guys have lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov. Conor McGregor got beat by him. But people can still hold on to the fact that Conor kind of maybe won a round. Dustin Poirier lost him. You guys know how much I love Dustin Poirier. But at least Poirier had a few good transitions. He landed a couple good shots. He still got dominated, but there was at least portions of the fight where you could take a few positive notes from. Michael Johnson landed a punch that, if you ask Joe Rogan, just wobbled Khabib. He's still hurt from that single shot. But when you actually go back and watch that fight, it's the most KGB fight I've ever seen in my life. Khabib holds Michael Johnson against the cage and begs him to quit while he's hitting him in the head. That would change me forever. Now, here's the thing. I don't have wins over Tony Ferguson, Edson Barbosa, and Dustin Poirier, so I'm not made of the same stuff Michael Johnson is. But when I look back at that one fight, that really set in motion the modern-day version of Michael Johnson that we're seeing. And yes, he did have that good fight with Justin Gaethje right after that, of course. But that just sort of cemented the fact that Michael Johnson isn't good when fights get really tough. When you do push him to the brink, it's not that he's going to fold. Because, again, he took so much damage even in the Gaethje fight that it's really insane. But he folds under that pressure. If you can get him up against the cage, when the going gets tough, I don't know if Michael Johnson gets tougher. And there's some fighters who I point to, and I think that's the case. Like, if you make Justin Gaethje really dig down deep and start to fight you, that's when the best version of him comes out. Eddie Alvarez, I would put in that. Tony Ferguson, I would say the same thing about. A lot of these top-tier lightweights and featherweights, like, you hit them, that just sort of fires them up. I don't know if Michael Johnson's made from that same material. I think if Michael Johnson gets off to a great start, he can build upon that. But I do think Michael Johnson, at least throughout this stage of his career, has fallen into a bit of a rut, where if you can really make him work hard in that first round, if you can put the fight to him early, he will just sort of let it go as it progresses. And again, we're just bringing up his current record, so I've got to say it right now. His last two wins are Andre Fili and Artem Lobov.
I'm going to go through Michael Johnson's record. So he loses to Khabib. He's a minus 155 favorite against Justin Gaethje. He loses. He's a minus 200 favorite against Darren Elkins. He gets submitted. He's a minus 105 favorite. I guess he'd be near even or underdog status with Andre Fili. Beats him by split decision. He's a minus 710 favorite over Artem Lobov. Wins a unanimous decision. I was sitting there cage side.
Closer than you'd like.
Way closer of a fight than you want for Michael Johnson against Artem Lobov. He's a minus 125 favorite against Josh Emmett. He gets knocked out. He's a minus 260 favorite against Stevie Ray. He loses by majority decision. He's a minus 110 against Thiago Moises, and he loses. You see a theme here? He's a favorite in all of these fights, and he's won 2 of them.
And it is somewhat justified, which is crazy. Like, when you think of Michael Johnson, at least when I think of Michael Johnson, the first image that comes to my head is him doing to what Dustin Poirier to what Poirier just did to McGregor. Like, the fact that his highlight is he knocked out one of the best lightweights ever, and then he beat 2 other of the more entertaining and better lightweights ever by decision. He has periods of inactivity, and against a guy like Clay Guida, like what I just said, like Clay Guida, when he gets off to a good start, he's going to do stuff no matter what. And that's what I can be confident about with Clay Guida no matter what. The output's always going to be there. If he's 31, if he's 39, he's always going to be doing a lot. And listen, he got cracked by Jim Miller before he got submitted by him, and he lost decision to Bobby Green. But when you look at some of his other performances, like Charles Oliveira beat him, but Charles Oliveira is one of the best fighters in the world. He beat the brakes off BJ Penn, which all of a sudden might not be the most difficult thing to do in the world. And then, but even the performances before that, like Clay Guida is going to make you fight, and that's not something that I know Michael Johnson's prepared to do anymore. Like, if Clay Guida goes out there and he is able to chain his wrestling with his volume, I don't think Michael Johnson has that one big punch in his arsenal anymore, so I don't know if I think Michael Johnson can knock out Clay Guida, because in my head right now, that's how I look at this. Can Johnson KO Guida, or can Guida just do enough to make it work for 15 minutes?
That's the thing. I mean, you look at Clay Guida's last win. That was against Bobby Green. It was on a 2-fight losing streak. Green beats Guida, then he beats Venata, then he beats Alain Patrick, and it's like, holy crap. Clay Guida's going to the top. This guy is everything, and then he loses to Thiago Moises on Halloween. So for Michael Johnson, where's he at in his career? Because again, I agree with you. We've talked a lot more about Michael Johnson than we have about Clay Guida, because in the fight that Clay Guida had against Bobby Green, well, Bobby Green had really good takedown defense, and his boxing was on point, and he won that fight. What's Michael Johnson good at?
Exactly.
Everything that Bobby Green's good at. They're like not a carbon copy of a fighter, because Michael Johnson doesn't do the shoulder lean. But again, they fight very similarly. I mean, they're both halfway flat on their feet, but they have all right movement on the feet, but they're both flat. They don't really move the balls of their feet. Michael Johnson's a good boxer, and he throws a lot of combinations, and he has speed. So does Bobby Green. And Michael Johnson has good takedown defense, and he has good takedown offense. Bobby Green has good takedown defense. Not really the most offensive with his takedowns, but
he's surprising with him.
He's all right. He's all right. So I would say that's a very good comparison. Green beat Guida. Can Johnson beat Guida? Well, this is MMA math, and it doesn't really work out that way. So let's have a look at the odds quick, because again, Michael Johnson's always a favorite. In this fight, Michael Johnson opened a minus 350 favorite. He's now minus 219. Clay Guida opened a plus 285. He's now a plus 175 over on best fight odds as an average. The Tapology picks, because it's always interesting to kind of look at the odds and then look at what the fans are thinking. 1,203 total votes, 79% Johnson, 63% decision. Best version of Michael Johnson beats Clay Guida. That's what I think. Yeah. That's what I think.
But here's the problem. I haven't seen the best version of Michael Johnson in like 6 years. It's been a while. Like, you can't rely on Michael Johnson to be the fighter that you once thought he was. And listen, I have this problem with a lot of fighters. Like, I'm not a big Tyron Woodley fan, but I have friends who are big Tyron Woodley fans, and they sent me, hey, Tyron Woodley's fight Vicente Luque. How do you think that's going to go? I've watched a lot of Vicente Luque fights, and I've watched a lot of Tyron Woodley fights. Tyron Woodley doesn't like to do things, and Vicente Luque hits very hard. I know how that fight's going to go. You kind of have to forget about the fighter that the person once was, and you have to look at them in the present day. I think 39-year-old Clay Guida is going to beat Michael Johnson. Not a sentence I ever thought I would say, especially not on camera in front of other people, but I do like the overall work rate and activity from Clay Guida. I just can't rely on Michael Johnson to do enough to win 2 out of 3 rounds, and I don't like him to win by knockout, especially in this stage of his career. So I'm going to pick Clay Guida. I like him as an underdog on this card, but really a lot of underdogs seem to do well against Michael Johnson, but no. I'm going to say Guida probably by decision.
I'm going to go Johnson by decision, and the reason is I think we're going to have a little bit more volume on the feet, and as cheesy as it might sound, and this is not good for reasoning, but it's just a bit of a premonition. We get rid of the menace, we're going balls to the wall. This is the Michael Johnson train, because really, this is your last chance. I mean, you've lost 3 fights in a row where Josh Emmett knocked you out. You lost a majority decision to Stevie Ray. You lost to Thiago Moises and got submitted. You lose to 39-year-old Clay Guida. You're probably on the outs, and at 19 and 17, if you lose, Bellator, PFL, you fight Anthony Pettis. Like, what are we doing here? So, for me, Johnson, again, I like the takedown defense. I like the volume on the feet. For Clay Guida, again, he's always doing something, but Michael Johnson, I would think, should be able to beat him to the punch. If Clay Guida goes for a takedown attempt and Johnson does the old, I'm going like full sprawl out on the cage, you can't take me down, well, then Michael Johnson should have some success. But if this is the Michael Johnson that just decides to go absolutely brain neutral, then he will lose to Clay Guida, and I'll look like a donkey. And listen, it's happened. So, again, you want to talk in terms of confidence on picks? This is probably the least confident on the entire card, and the fact that Michael Johnson's a minus 219 favorite over Clay Guida is laughable.
No, I couldn't agree more. Again, I know what I'm going to get from a 39-year-old Clay Guida. He's still going to do the same stuff. He's going to be active. He's going to have the head movement. His hair is going to be going all over the place. And he will combine his wrestling with his boxing. With Michael Johnson, I could get that really good version, or I could get the version who just kind of stands still and reacts to what his opponent's doing. Unless he can hurt Clay Guida early on in this fight, I just think Clay Guida is going to build and build and build as the fight progresses. I love Guida by decision, honestly, especially as an underdog pick.
Matt, I'm really looking forward to this fight. You're going Guida, I'm going Johnson. It's going to be something that happened,
it will
probably, but we'll see what happens. We got a great co-main event. Frankie Edgar taking on Cory Sandhagen in our main event. Two guys that like to bang. Julian Lane would love this fight. We have Alistair Overeem taking on Alexandre Volkov. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, man. As we always say, let's get into it. Interesting fight coming up in our next one. At light heavyweight, we have slow Mike Rodriguez that has made himself known to UFC fans since appearing on Dana White's Contender Series. So far, it's been so-so. 2-3 record with a no contest that was a loss overturned to John Allen. And again, I mean, he had a knockout win over Adam Milstead. You look at his next win. He beat Marcin Prachniow, finished him. And then the losses. He loses the decision to Devin Clark. Probably shouldn't have been matched up with Devin Clark. He lost by TKO to Da Un Jung. I like Da Un Jung's boxing a lot. I think he's a good fighter. And then he lost to Ed Herman by submission in one of the weirdest fights I've ever seen in my entire life. Chris Tognoni. Oh boy.
Can you win and lose a fight at the same time? Like, that is one of those perfect examples of raise both their hands at the end of it. Like, Ed Herman, listen, you get the win, you submitted him. Mike Rodriguez deserved a second round knockout in that fight.
Somebody got their balls kicked into their throat. Or did they? Where were they? Ed Herman's got balls in his stomach. Are they ovaries? All right. I'm looking at this one.
Ed Herman just beats the shit out of both of them.
Danilo Marques is a guy that he's 35 years old. He's 6'6". He's really big for this weight class. And you'll see that when he steps into the cage. I remember previewing his fight against Hadis Ibrahimov back at UFC 253 going, why? Like, why is this guy in the UFC? And it's a bit of a slight. A lot of people were pretty, tough on us in the comments section because, of course, Danilo Marques won. But it's one of the worst fights you're ever going to see in your entire life. It's terrible. They're sluggish. They're sluggish from the time they step into the cage. And for Hadis Ibrahimov, that was probably one of the biggest busts. He's like on that Hassim Thabit type of realm.
I'm glad we decided to take this direction to the video, because let's just lay it out how it is. Hadis Ibrahimov might be the worst fighter to ever fight in the UFC.
Lost to Da Un Jung, lost to Ed Herman, lost to Roman Dolidze, lost to Danilo Marques. Hasn't fought since, but that was the end of 2020.
Don't know if he won a round in his UFC tenure.
If you look at Danilo Marques, though, let's pick out some of the wins. Well, in a second fight, he beat Alex Junius, who was 8-17. Goes along, fights some guys in the regional scene about 5 years ago. Then he beats Alison Jorge, that's 0-3. Then he loses to 6-6 Marcio Tellez. Then he beats 5-9 Junior Lorenzo. Then he loses to Myron Dennis, who's 13-6. That's fair. It was a main event of an LFA show. Beats 0-16 Mark Palomino. Beats 5-4-1 Clayton Caetano. Then takes 2 years off, plus 2.5 years. Then fights Hadis Ibrahimov. It's one of those ones where you go, what? Like, did they make a mistake in the paperwork? How do we end up here?
Okay, stylistically, Danilo Marques should be a tough matchup for Mike Rodriguez.
That's it.
Exactly, that's the problem. Like, you look at his record, you're like, oh, he's got submission wins, he's a decent wrestler. Defensively on the feet, leaves a lot to be desired, to be completely honest. But he does have the foundation, at least, of a decent light heavyweight, kind of heavyweight style grappler. Mike Rodriguez is weird, because okay, in his good performances, he looks good. He is a decent striker. He's got really nice long-range weapons, something we talk about a lot on here, where he's not going to be throwing the traditional just sort of front teep kicks to keep his opponent at bay. He'll throw a very similar shot selection to an Oven St. Preux, for instance, where he loves to throw that left kick to the body. He will load up on his shots a little bit, which he has paid for when he does fight those upper-level strikers, like he did against Da Un Jung. And you can just tell that real good technique tends to beat okay technique. Not a real huge hot take, but when he fought Jung, he just left himself really wide open. Danilo Marques has awful striking defense. He leaves his hands very low and he leaves his head very high. Not a great combination, especially in the light heavyweight division. Not saying Mike Rodriguez is this dynamic striker. He'll be able to find his chin no matter what. But you are fighting a decent power puncher at 205 pounds. This isn't the best matchup for Marques. When you look at his record, yes, he beat Hadis Ibrahimov, but that's his best win by far.
If you look at Danilo Marques in this fight, yeah, it's tricky because could he submit Mike Rodriguez? Sure he could. I mean, Mike Rodriguez is 11-5 with 1 no contest. I think submitting him is entirely possible. And again, if you look at the losses, Ed Herman submitted him. But that was a really weird fight. And he gets knocked out by Dawen Jung. Well, he's a great boxer. And he loses the decision to Devin Clark. Well, that's going to happen. And in the fight against John Allen, that's a really important one. Well, Allen beats him pillar to post and takes him down quite a bit. So John Allen is one of those guys that, like, really high tie stance when he's standing up. Roman Dolidze out-grappled him and out-wrestled him. Yeah, but Roman Dolidze is a great wrestler, and he's a world champion in grappling. So it made a lot of sense. But John Allen was able to kind of draw that out of Mike Rodriguez, where he saw, okay, John Allen's here, Mike Rodriguez is here. Danilo Marques is where? Well, Dolidze's up here. Where's Marques? Because, again, he's 10-2. It's a good record. Not really against the best level of competition. So let's look at the Tapology votes. Give us a little bit of an idea what the fans are thinking. 1,157 total votes, 81% Rodriguez, 81% for him to win by knockout. Then we look at the odds. Slow Mike opened to -240. And then they go all over the place. He's now -238. So really the line's about where it was, but there's been movement for both guys. For Danilo Marques, open to +205. He's now at a +190. Average on best fight odds. So Mike Rodriguez favored by the fans. The odds have Mike Rodriguez so far. But this is still a really weird fight.
It is a weird fight, but again, it comes down to the fact that both guys are quite inconsistent. And for Marques, I do like his grappling. I think if he can get top position on Mike Rodriguez, he definitely impose a lot of his grappling game. It's really weird, though. I don't trust him on the feet at all against Rodriguez, and it's not that I'm this huge Mike Rodriguez stan by any means. He's just got decent power at long range. He is good at finding his way around your guard, too, especially against opponents who sort of hold their hands up and like to outweight their opponent just throwing. Marques, if he does find himself in that position, especially up against the cage, if Marques is the one moving forward, he might be able to secure a takedown. But if Rodriguez is the one moving forward in this fight, he should just be able to unload with combinations. I like his leg kicks, I like his body work, and I do think if he can invest in both those techniques, especially early on, he'll be able to even the playing field as it does progress into that late second, early third round. I like Mike Rodriguez in this fight. Not saying I love Mike Rodriguez's ceiling by any means at 205 pounds, but I do think he'll be able to get it done.
Like, I look at Danilo Marques in the conversation of heavyweight, light heavyweight grappler types. How many do we see? Nikita Krylov at 205.
Fabrizio Verdum?
Fabrizio Verdum, but Krylov can bring in that striking. He's really unorthodox. He's a weird guy to try and fight.
Verdum might be the GOAT.
Fabrizio Verdum was like Muay Thai champ every now and again, but also his ground game is probably the best in the world at 265 pounds. Or is Danilo Marques more like Robert Drysdale and Tom DeBlas, where we're up here at 265, we are strictly grapplers, and you really have to worry about that? Well, we saw Danilo Marques strike a little bit in the Hadis Ibrahimov fight, but it was one of the worst fights I've ever seen. I mean, it was on the level of Ngannou Lewis. It was right up there. So it was really tough to try and get a gauge. If you feel really confidently about this fight, let us know down in the comments section, because there were definitely people that liked Danilo Marques in the fight against Hadis Ibrahimov. And you were right. I'll take Mike Rodriguez because, again, I like the power. I like the fact that every now and again he'll step in with that lead leg up, like a little bit of a tie stance, but he offers different looks, and he certainly has power. His ground game's not great, and a volume striker could beat him, and a good wrestler can beat him. There's all sorts of ways to beat Mike Rodriguez. I don't know if Danilo Marques can. Sure, his grappling's great, his submission abilities are great, but I have slightly more confidence in Mike Rodriguez. This one stays off my card. Oh, yeah. But Matt, we're both going with Mike Rodriguez out of Massachusetts to get the win. We got a great card coming up and a lot of great fights. Dariush in the rematch against Fahea. We've got Cory Sandhagen taking on Frankie Edgar in the main event. Overeem against a really tough out in Alexandre Volkov. So you're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. Really interesting fight coming up at flyweight, and we have a fighter moving down from bantamweight in her debut in Lara Procópio, and we haven't seen her since her UFC debut, which was her first loss of her young career against Karol Rosa. They went tit for tat. Rosa got the better of her. It was really just the combinations and then that leg kick on the inside at the end of the combinations that really strung it together for Rosa. A little bit more pop on her shot. She has a good fight coming up on this card. Make sure you check out that video taking on Joselyne Edwards. But in this one, at 125 pounds, Procópio is going to be taking on Molly McCann. An old meatball so far in the UFC. 3 wins, 2 losses. The losses are sandwiched on the ends. And in her UFC debut, she took on Jillian Robertson. Did not win that fight. That's going to happen. Then she lost the decision to Taila Santos her last time out in a fight where I remember I said Molly McCann was going to win as the lock of the night. Yeah, boo me now, laugh at me now on your screen. Listen, I'm a man of my word, and by that, I'll tell you what I did in that one, and that's who I picked, and I was totally wrong. Why was I wrong? Well, Tyler Santos looks like a world beater after losing to Mara Romero Barella in her debut and got a big win over Jillian Robertson her last time out. But for Molly McCann, the 3 wins, really interesting. Priscilla Cachoeira, she beats Ariane Lipski, and then she beats Diana Belbizia. All of them by decision, but all different looks from Molly McCann. We've seen her volume strike. We've seen her do a little bit of power punching. We've even seen her wrestle in some of these fights. And that's the thing out of Molly McCann. Really, well-rounded.
100%. And she came into the UFC because I remember going into the Robertson fight. Now, for 100% transparency, Robertson choked her unconscious for like too long. Like, it was one of those ones where she's out and the ref's like,
you were Cage Warriors champ. We'll let you continue.
Yeah, like, we'll just let you be unconscious for longer. Maybe you didn't sleep well last night. It was just one of those uncomfortable finishes. But it does seem like that made Molly McCann improve her style. She went into that fight being a boxer. It's, oh, look at the boxing of Molly McCann. The boxing of Molly McCann is so good. She's really become a more well-rounded martial artist since that fight. And of course, it's easy to say. She gets choked unconscious, and we haven't seen her get choked unconscious since. So of course her grappling has improved. But we've seen a more wrestling offensive game from her. She will go for the takedown every now and then. And I do like it because it's not that if you're good on the feet, you're automatically good at ground and pound. Molly McCann has really nice ground and pound for top position. She's really heavy on top, so she is able to secure the takedown. She won't necessarily just give it up instantly. Like, Poirier took McGregor down, but McGregor immediately got back up to his feet. If McCann takes you down more often than not, she is able to control position, and she will be able to hold you down, which isn't something you often see from a boxer.
And let's look at those numbers just really quick, because in the fight against Cachoeira, she took her down twice. In the fight against Lipski, took her down twice. In the fight against Belbizia, she beat her pretty bad. Took her down 5 times, too, in that one.
Exactly. And I don't know if it's the case where a lot of her opponents do go in expecting to be fighting a boxer, so they're not expecting the takedown attempt. But Molly McCann really has shown massive progress in her wrestling game. And I do think that's something that we're going to expect in this fight. And really, just for all of her fights from here on out, I do think the wrestling offense of Molly McCann is something that people won't really be talking about. But it's a big X factor from now on, because just her hands, listen, she's a decent boxer for MMA. But the problem is, and we see this a lot from good boxers making the transition to MMA, you don't kick, and your boxing isn't always suited towards MMA the best. And that's why we talk about, like, Michael Bisping is a great MMA kickboxer. Would he win a Glory World title? Probably not. But his kickboxing in MMA is phenomenal. But that's because he's expecting the takedown. He has the takedown defense to go with it. Molly McCann isn't Michael Bisping by any means, but she is starting to put together the grappling side of things with her wrestling and her striking. And I just really like what we're seeing from Molly McCann. I understand she lost her last fight, but I do think this is a fighter who's starting to put everything together and becoming more of an MMA fighter. This is going to be a tough fight for her against Lara Procópio, because she's still not a great fighter down the stretch. Where you see Molly McCann's fight, she'll do really well for 2 rounds, and she will start to tire as the fight progresses. And she doesn't throw leg kicks, which was the big weakness that Lara had in her last fight. Again, I'm sure you're going to talk about the leg kicks against Rosa. She's not going to be expecting the same weapon, but I still think Molly McCann can go for the takedown a lot in this fight, even though her boxing, listen, they're going to talk about it a lot, but the wrestling of Molly McCann is something that people are going to have to start looking out for.
For Lara Procópio, coming into this one, she was a Shuto champ at flyweight and bantamweight. Again, this is the thing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and we saw it out of her in the fight against Karol Rosa. I can volume strike, and again, she lost that fight, and Rosa looked good. But Procópio, if you look at the numbers, very high striking totals in that one.
And we just made a video about best losses. She could have kind of been nominated. Not that the fight was really at the same level as the other fights that we talked about, but she was a fighter who I'd say gained stock in their loss.
And this is the interesting thing, too. And, full transparency, when we look at a couple of fighters, do I look at height and reach a lot? Well, not so much. I mean, it's important in certain fights, like Danilo Marques and Mike Rodriguez. Mike Rodriguez has a huge reach advantage over everybody. Marques is a couple inches taller. Do I really care a whole lot about the height advantage of Danilo Marques? Maybe not so much. Maybe it'll play a little bit of effect in terms
Unless you know advanced stats that I know.
The takedown abilities, but I don't really see a lot in this one. For Lara Procópio, height-wise, pretty much the same. Reach-wise, big time for Procópio. I've seen the volume out of her strikes. For Molly McCann, I don't really think Procópio is as heavy a hitter as Tyler Santos. Again, could not be higher in Tyler Santos. Since that fight against Molly McCann, proved me totally wrong, and then went out there and put on that great performance against Jillian Robertson. For Procópio, I don't think that she has the same power as a Tyler Santos, but I do like the volume, and I do like that jiu-jitsu black belt in the back pocket. Again, That's another thing that you can't put a whole lot of stock in. You look at certain fighters and, oh, so-and-so is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, but maybe they submitted a black belt in jiu-jitsu. It all depends on how it comes together in a fight. If you look Procópio, 1 win by knockout, 2 wins by submissions, 3 by decision. And in terms of submission wins, hasn't won one by submission in about 3 years, but she hasn't been very active either. And the final thing I'll say about Procópio, she was originally supposed to take on Courtney Casey back in May. Unfortunately, that fight fell out due to the state of the world and cards that fell out at that time. But that's pretty telling that they put her in there against a Courtney Casey, against a Molly McCann, like recognizable names.
Oh, 100%. Here's the thing, though. It's been over a year since we've been able to see Procópio fight, and it's not like the Casey Kenny that they were going to match her up with.
Courtney Casey?
Courtney Casey, good, it's not Casey Kenny. It's not like the Courtney Casey that they were matching her up with was the Courtney Casey of old, who was a ranked fighter. Courtney Casey's been on a bit of a downstretch in her career, so I don't know if I put a lot of stock into the UFC matching you up with Courtney Casey.
That's why I said recognizable name.
Exactly. I think Molly McCann should be able to win this fight, and I do think it's coming down to the wrestling. If Procópio gets the takedown on Molly McCann, she's going to absolutely dominate her on the ground, and I really do believe that. But if Molly McCann can keep this fight standing, again, I like the kicks of Lara, and I do think she has a more diverse skill set on the feet, but I do just think the meat and potatoes game plan of Molly McCann, she knows what she's good at, and I think that's a really important thing in MMA that doesn't get talked about enough. And we really rag on Sarah McMahon for this because Sarah McMahon doesn't know what she's good at. Molly McCann is starting to become a more comfortable and more well-rounded MMA fighter, and if she can keep this fight on the feet, I think she can win a decision, but I do think Lara only needs one takedown.
Matt, you don't get a chance to look at my notes, and I do paper notes for these. You didn't get to look at my notes beforehand because I keep them to myself normally, but the main point is you talked about Molly McCann talking about the meat and potatoes of her game. I'm going to give you a quote, and this was after a win over Diana Belbizia. She said, "I only got ranked like last month, so I can't beat Charlie Big Potatoes just yet." Straight up, never heard that sentence in my life. Looked it up in Urban Dictionary. It's an English thing. I think it's a North London thing. Somebody from North London or England in general, you're probably going to be able to help me out here. We're all from the Commonwealth. We're Canadians. I've got a patch Maple Leaf there. Charlie Big Potatoes. So you got Charlie Big Potatoes, you got no nickname Procópio, and you made my case for the reason why I like Lara Procópio in this fight. Again, if you mix in a little bit of that leg kick to the lead leg of Molly McCann, you're going to slow down the offense. You're going to slow down the power punches. Again, if you switch levels just a little bit, if you make things a little gritty, that's where Molly McCann can thrive. The one thing I don't like out of McCann, I've seen her face swell up too much in fights. And I don't love it. I don't love it.
But she's not fighting someone with power behind her shot. So I agree with your point. I just don't think this is an opponent who can take advantage of it. Here's the thing with Molly McCann, too. She's always moving forward. So although the kicks of Procópio are an advantage, she's not getting the chance to throw a lot of them because she will be on her back foot a lot. So I doubt she'll get the chance to really set and throw. Now, here's the thing. If neither one is really making any advancements and they are just sort of striking in the middle of the cage, we're going to see a lot of those 50-50 exchanges, kind of similar to a Joanne Calderwood when she fought Jessica, where it was a lot of, we're both going to throw at the same time, and we'll both land shots here and there. I think Molly McCann will win some of those 50-50 exchanges. I like her forward pressure in this fight. I'm not going to say Molly McCann's a confident pick by any means, but I am going to side with her in this one.
And I'm going to go with Lara Procópio in this one, again, because of the volume. And if it's a volume-heavy attack, especially in those 50-50s, but even on her back foot, we saw it where Hossa was able to take over in that circumstance, but I just don't know if Molly McCann can bring together that same amount of volume. We've seen it in certain fights. This is really going to be a good gauge of where these two women
100%.
In this division. And again, it's a very fluid division at 125. Procópio has a much better advantage to advance at 35 than she does, at 25 than she does at 35. And it might be a bit of a head scratcher there, but there is a lot of old guard type of talent at 35 that it's going to take a lot more wins to get up near the top. And then you've got a champion that isn't overly active based on the fact that she has to fight in two different divisions and kind of take on all comers.
Beats everyone in both of them.
So for Lara Procópio, good opportunity here. For Molly McCann, the same can be said. Want to get back on the win streak for both of these women. I'm going to go with Lara Procópio in this one. You're going to go with Molly McCann. But overall, really looking forward to this card. Diego Ferreira taking on Beneil Dariush. Cody Stamann's taking on Andre Ewell. You've got, Cory Sandhagen taking on Frankie Edgar. And in the main event, you have Drago, Alexander Volkov, taking on the Reem, the Demolition Man, any nickname you want to use, Alistair, Overeem. It's going to be a great one. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. Really interesting fight at 135 pounds. We have a guy who switched up his nickname. He's the second Spartan, but not the Spartan. We have Cody Stamann, who used to be known by Mr. Wonderful, like Paul Orndorff of all people. He's taken on Mr. Highlight, Andre Ewell, in a really dynamic, contrasting styles type of fight. Because for Andre Ewell, he can do things off of his back. He ends up there too much to my liking, but it's really his striking that shines. And this is a guy, and everybody's going to talk about it, so let's talk about it too. He has a 9.5-inch reach advantage over Cody Stamann. That's unbelievable.
It's wild. Like, that's unheard of. Unless John Jones is fighting, like, a welterweight, you're probably not going to see that kind of discrepancy.
Deron Winn?
Yeah, that would really be the only case. Here's the problem, though. You know when reach isn't an advantage? When you're on your back. You know what Cody Stamann hates doing? Stand-up fighting. And, again, you can't rag on him because he has been so successful in the UFC. But Cody Stamann, I don't think he's going out there looking to win an MMA fight all the time. I think he's going out there expecting a decision win because the way he fights, and it's easy for us to criticize fighters.
I think he beat the piss out of you for saying that.
That's fine. All day long, he trains fighting. I don't. But Cody Stamann, he's a phenomenal wrestler. He has a good ground game. But he's not a guy who's going to go in there looking for a big ground and pound finish. And he's not always advancing for submissions. And listen, I can let the cat out of the bag a little early. Cody Stamann's probably going to win this fight. He's the much more dominant wrestler out of these two. He has good striking defense where I don't see Ewell's able to catch him with anything that a guy like Tom Dukenma back in the day wouldn't have been able to. I just think Cody Stamann, he's a great defensive fighter on the feet, but he's got such a dominating wrestling game plan that most guys just can't keep up with him from a physical standpoint. Here's my issues with Cody Stamann. When he does fight the elite of the division, you can just get rid of his wrestling and you're going to be able to beat Cody Stamann. We saw Aljamain Sterling able to do it. Now, I understand not many fighters have the level of jiu-jitsu that Aljamain Sterling has. He is in that very unique category of, like, every second you're on the mat with me, I can finish you really any way. You can go for your leg, your arm. Of course, he got poor Cody Stamann with the Suluev stretch, one of the more rare submissions you'll ever see. And then he fights Jimmy Rivera, and it's like, okay, is Cody Stamann the younger version of Jimmy Rivera? They do fight in a very similar manner. Jimmy Rivera said, nope, I can just defend all of his takedowns and beat him up on the feet. That's the big problem with Cody Stamann. I think he's going to win this fight, and I think Cody Stamann beats every single bantamweight in the world who's not ranked right now, or not, in a major organization. My issue with Cody Stamann, and something you always have to do, you have to start looking forward at a certain point, and I just don't know what he does against the top guys of the division. I know we're supposed to be breaking down Andre Ewell versus Cody Stamann, but for me, it does get to the point of Cody Stamann's going to out-wrestle most of these guys at bantamweight, but when he does start fighting the Jose Aldos, the Pedro Munozes, the Frankie Edgars, the Cory Sandhagens, the Piotr Jans, and the Cory Sandhagens alike, you're going to need more than just your wrestling. I don't know if I trust him to go out there and beat those elite of the division if he is just going out there looking to dominate his opponents with his wrestling. I think he'll be able to get past Andre Ewell. It's a dangerous fight, don't get me wrong. Andre Ewell's very dangerous on the feet. I just don't really know what you do with Cody Stamann after this. He's starting to become a bit of a Corey Anderson-esque character for me.
I mean, I love how you had a senior moment there, just going Cory Sandhagen twice. Cody Stamann, Cory Sandhagen 2 times. That'd be a good fight. But if I look at this one, Stamann coming into the UFC, he's what, 13-1, 14-1? He got to 17-1, fought Sterling, and then he lost. Then if you look at the last, 5 fights, loses Sterling, beats Alejandro Perez. What's Alejandro Perez not great at? His wrestling's not amazing. Has a draw against Song Yadong. So I went back and I looked at that one. Song Yadong loses a point in the first round. If he didn't, he might have won that fight. And that's the thing. Like, if you look at the decision as a whole, what was it? The majority of the panelists on MMA decisions had it for Stamann. But it all stems back to that point deduction in that one.
That fight's a great example, too, and it reminds me exactly of when Darren Stewart fought Deron Winn, of Cody Stamann out-wrestles Song Yadong throughout that whole entire fight. He could take him down pretty much at will. He just doesn't do a lot with the takedowns, and the whole time the fight's on the feet, he is getting lit up, especially at range, because he doesn't really check leg kicks all that well, and he can't get hit to the body. So my point is, he can out-wrestle basically everybody. He can't outstrike many, and that really worries me. I don't think Ewell's the guy who can really expose that flaw in his game, but again, just looking forward for Cody Stamann, it makes me a little worried.
The best fight, and the best win, I should say, on Cody Stamann's record is when he came out, and obviously the circumstances around the fight were unfortunate. He had just lost his brother, but he came out and fought Brian Kelleher and looked amazing. That was a really good Cody Stamann fight, and that's how he got Jimmy Rivera. And listen, I know Jimmy Rivera, Brian Kelleher, they fought a few times, and how can you compare the two? But Jimmy Rivera, what's he great at? Well, he's a really good boxer, and he has really good wrestling. And that's the thing, where Stamann's boxing wasn't on the same level as Jimmy Rivera, and the defensive wrestling of Rivera could really negate the offense from Stamann. Rivera was able to outstrike Stamann on the feet and really just kind of wear on him that way. And it's odd to say that because normally Cody Stamann's wearing on another fighter.
Exactly.
Aljamain Sterling is like a jack of all trades. And we all know this. You saw the fight that he had against Sandhagen. You've seen a lot of his fights. He's like a more evolved Brett Johns. His game on the feet is a lot better. So when I look at Cody Stamann and I look at Andre Ewell, let's focus on Andre Ewell for a second, because you look at the fights that he's had so far in the UFC, he comes in and he beats one of the best bantamweights of all time in Renan Barão. I know it's crazy to say now, but he beats Renan Barão. He loses to Nathaniel Wood by submission. Okay, well, that's going to happen. Nathaniel Wood, forever a prospect. That's going to happen.
Still a very good fighter, though.
Beats Anderson Dos Santos. Well, what Anderson Dos Santos is it? Is it the guy that fought Martin Day that looked like a world beater? Or is it the Anderson Dos Santos that kind of just was like a bag in the wind? Like, okay.
That was the one Andre Ewell fought.
That's the one that Andre Ewell fought. He loses to Chito Vera. That's going to happen. It is. And then he beats Jonathan Martinez, but just about everybody and their dog thought that Jonathan Martinez won that fight. And then he beats Irwin Rivera by split decision, and that happens. This is the one thing that I want to talk about with Andre Ewell, because again, the reach advantage is good, his striking's really good. He's a very, very long and rangy fighter for this division. You know this. His takedown defense is actually pretty good. That's the weird thing. So I'm going to give you the numbers. Let's be fair. Irwin Rivera went 1 for 9. Jonathan Martinez went 0 for 3. Vera went 0 for 1. Anderson Dos Santos went 2 for 9. Nathaniel Wood went 2 for 3, and Barão went 3 of 5. That's not that bad.
It's not, but the issue really comes down to what happens when he does get held down by, the one takedown. Marlon Vera absolutely exposed Andre Ewell on the floor. And listen, I get it. Marlon Vera is a phenomenal fighter. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know. But what Marlon Vera was able to do to Andre Ewell, where he just closed the distance, didn't let Andre Ewell use any of his long range, he's got that beautiful 1-2, and he is really good at using his range. One of the good fighters at using his range in space. But again, once you collapse that distance and really force him to become an inside fighter, Marlon Vera threw 1,000 hooks to his body, elbowed him a bunch in the head, and was able to get the takedown. But it was interesting. He got takedowns very unorthodox methods. He got that head and arm choke that he sort of wrestled him to the ground with. But once the fight was on the mat, Marlon Vera absolutely teed off with ground and pound, elbowed him about 1,000,000 times. Same thing with Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood, once the fight did finally hit the mat, he was able to out-grapple Andre Ewell quite a bit. Cody Stamann's a better wrestler than both those guys, and by quite a bit. So I just think that we've seen the game plan laid out. And Cody Stamann, that's his game plan for all of his fights. Take my opponent down, don't take much damage. Well, that's how Andre Ewell loses most of his fights, so I do think this is a pretty black and white fight.
That's the thing. I mean, he beat Irwin Rivera, and Rivera at the time, 10-5, won by split decision. Well, what's Rivera? The classic wrestle boxer, but not on the same level as, a Justin James, a Dan Ige, all the extreme couture guys like Cody Stamann, Chad Mendes. Irwin Rivera's not really like that. He took a lot of chances on the feet. He, closed distance with power punches, leave himself exposed. That's how, he lost 6 fights up to that point. Cody Stamann doesn't really do that. He kind of just walks you down, keeps his head back, keeps his arms out a little bit. Not so much like Randa Marcos, but kind of. And then he just gets you up against the fence, takes you down, puts your legs between his, holds you down, and then just kind of stays on top.
Are you his corner, man?
I might be. Extreme Couture's next coach. I'll be a wrestling coach. I'll be like Alex Munoz over at Team MMA or Team Alpha Male. If we have a look at the Topology votes, 1,175 of them, 86% going Stamann, 87% by decision. If we have a look at the odds, Stamann opened -265, now -311. Andre Ewell opened +185. He's now a +242 average on best fight odds. Let me give an opportunity to give Andre Ewell a chance here. Because, again, this has been a very Cody Stamann-esque
I wonder why.
video. And it's never good to go one-sided like that. We don't normally do that with Fight Night Picks. We usually try and give a black and white opportunity for fighters to win. For Andre Ewell in this fight, again, you mentioned it. His boxing's pretty good. He lands a decent amount of kicks. If he sets up a lot of leg kicks early, maybe that's path to victory. You can really get to wrestlers that way.
Here's the issue, and you said it with your word choice. Set up. He needs time to set everything up and to land it multiple times. Cody Stamann's not going to give you the time of day for any of those techniques. This is why I'm so confident in this, and this is why I want to know what 13% out there didn't pick Cody Stamann by decision. Because, A, he's not going to knock out Andre Ewell. I really doubt he's going to get a big ground and pound finish. He won't submit him. He's going to take him down 1 to 2 times every single round, though, and just really get a bunch of top control in this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. Maybe Andre Ewell catches him in like a classic wrestler. We're taking on a wrestler. We get him in a guillotine, or we get him into a darce. Like, we do something wild, but I don't really see that out of Andre Ewell.
If Andre Ewell darce chokes Cody Stamann, I'll do something.
I mean, you already shaved, so we'll shave your head. If Andre Ewell gets a darce choke win over Cody Stamann, let it be known, Matt's going to shave his hair, and I just voluntold you.
But that's fine.
But I agree with you. I'm going to take Cody Stamann in this fight. 13th ranked bantamweight at this point. And again, the only higher level wrestler I think that could maybe get a win, Movsar Evloev here. Like, it's pretty tricky to think of a guy that's going to out-wrestle Cody Stamann. And you're really going to have to go for a high level jack of all trades type fighter. Jimmy Rivera was a good, comparable fighter to Cody Stamann. Rivera got the win. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens after this one. I've got Stamann here.
Stamann by decision. One of my more confident picks on the card.
Matt, both of us going with Cody Stamann to get the win. We got a great card upcoming. Oh, yeah. Dariush is taking on a really tough out in Fahea. You've got one of my favorite fights, probably my favorite fight on this card, Alexandre Pantoja taking on Manel Kape. And the list goes on and on until we get Overeem and Volkov. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. This is by far my favorite fight on this card. Flyweight never die. We have the long-awaited debut of one Manel Kape, and this is a guy that's representing Angola as well as Portugal. And holy smokes, did he have himself a 2019. Started it off. He had a win over Seichiro Ito, and then he had a big finish win over Takeya Mitsugaki, and then he had a big finish win in the rematch against Kai Asakura that only had the one loss to that point. And again, you go back and you look at Manel Kape's record, and you might say, oh, well, it was so-so when he came over with Ryzen. He beat Ersin Yamamoto. Then he had the win over Ian McCall. That was a really weird one.
Very.
Loses to Kyoji Oraguchi. Loses split decision to Kai Asakura. Beats Yusaku Nakamura. And then he loses to Oka Sasaki in a decision. Ray Longo was in the corner. Harry Connick Jr. likes the freaking lasagna. But again, 2019, rising 15, 18, and 20. All second-round finishes. And if you look at a guy like Manel Kape, he wears wrestling shoes and socks. That could be a weird transition. And he's used to fighting in a ring. That's another weird transition. I have a book in front of me by Lee Montville, Sting Like a Bee. Manel Kape has some of the best footwork, best boxing footwork that I've seen in MMA in a while. Now, we talked about Mahmoud Muradov here recently when he fought Andrew Sanchez, the fact that he has a great L-step. He's a really good boxer. Didn't know how good of a defensive wrestler he would be. Didn't know he'd try and take Andrew Sanchez down and actually take him down. But in this fight, if you go back and watch Manel Kape, the one takeaway that I have, one huge takeaway, his head movement's great. He'll stunt on his opponents, which is kind of cool to see. Against Mitsugaki, he did the old bobbing for apples, which I always love. But he moves his feet, but he's very economical when he moves his feet. You know, we talk about fighters where, they're always moving around the ring, moving away from the power hand. But if you watch Manel Kape, he'll start southpaw, and then he'll move orthodox. But the best thing that he does when he switches his stances, when he's fighting southpaw, I've found that one of his best strikes is his right hook, so his lead hand. But when he switches and fights orthodox, well, his best strike's his left hook. And if you want to see a great finish, it's the footwork that he has against Takeya Mitsugaki, where he spins and then he throws a right out there and knocks Mitsugaki flat on his back. It's amazing. Go check that out. But again, his footwork is amazing. I can't oversell it. Opposite him, Alexandre Pantoja, Matt. This is a guy that we've known for a very long time. He came in off The Ultimate Fighter season 24 and kind of like a buzzsaw through the division. And I know he's lost fights along the way. Dustin Ortiz has beat him. Devison Figueiredo's beaten him. Askar Askarov. And if you want to be cheap, well, he's 1-2 in his last 3 fights. But Alexandre Pantoja is a great fighter.
He is a tough fighter for anyone to deal with, especially a flyweight, because he just brings a lot of intangibles we don't really see at such a lightweight class. He has, I would argue, he has the punching power of John Lineker. He's got really good ground game, too, and that's something that he doesn't get the credit for. If you just look at that Askar Askarov fight, yeah, he gets, and I won't really even say outstruck, because I think on the feet, Pantoja did a great job. He was landing some big power shots, but Askarov would take him down, and he was just so good on the ground, and this is, Askar Askarov doesn't really get enough credit. You're really high on him, but you're about the only person who is, it seems. He was just able to neutralize a lot of the weapons that Pantoja has. He's good enough on the ground defensively where the jiu-jitsu Pantoja, he was never really able to get himself going, especially off of his back, so Askarov was able to control him from the top position. So you get out-grappled by Askar Askarov, no real issue there. That's going to happen to a lot of guys. The fight against Deiveson Figueiredo is one of the greatest flyweight fights of all time. It's such a phenomenal fight because you had Deiveson Figueiredo, before he was champ, of course, just running through everybody. And a lot of people thought this fight would just kind of be more of the same from both guys. Pantoja is game, and that's something that it's hard to really put a number to associate gameness, but Pantoja, you're always going to get the best version of him no matter what. And this is what I love about the matchmaking. I have a lot of questions about Manel Kape coming into the UFC.
That's fair.
It really is. He fought in a ring. He had shoes on in his other fights. But even level of competition, like you bring up, he looked really good knocking out Takeo Mizugaki. In 2019, if Alexandre Pantoja fought Takeo Mizugaki in 2019, I'm sure the result would probably be very similar. He'd also finish him in probably a spectacular way. I know what I'm going to get from Pantoja, though. He's going to have phenomenal punching power, and honestly, I would say he's the second most powerful athlete in the division, right behind the champ in Figueiredo, and if you go back and watch their fights, it really proves that. He cracks Figueiredo with some absolute bombs. Figueiredo, one of the better chins we've really seen, and of course, he's also got ungodly power. What he was able to do, and this is really Pantoja's claim to fame, he not only beat Brandon Moreno in the UFC, he was also submitted him on The Ultimate Fighter, and that was a weird fight, because on The Ultimate Fighter, it was that season where they brought in a bunch of those regional champs from all over. Pantoja, he gets the win, but you don't really know what to expect out of either guy for the future of the UFC career. Turns out, they're both very, very good at fighting, and they do get matched up again, and it was after the main event that Moreno had with Sergio Pettis, so really, not to say Brandon Moreno was at the peak of his power, because I would argue right now is probably as good as Brandon Moreno's ever been.
Yeah, he was at the bottom of his power. That was see you later, Brandon. You got to go fight on the regional scene, get one win, and then shock the world all the way up to the title.
But Pantoja beat the brakes off Brandon Moreno in that fight, and it wasn't competitive at all. So it is wild to think of that, okay, I know he got cut, and we've seen a new version of Brandon Moreno, but that fight wasn't that long ago, and you look at what Pantoja was able to do in that fight, and just really the complete performance he was able to put on against Brandon Moreno, it gives me a lot of confidence in this fight. Does Manel Kape have the power to knock out Pantoja? Of course he does. I won't disrespect him like that. Will he get the opportunities to knock out Pantoja? He will, because Pantoja, for as good of a striker as he is, he will get hit. Now, it's a benefit because it will kind of gloat his opponent to stay in that pocket for maybe that one extra punch, and that's when they can ultimately get caught themselves. This fight is such a fan-friendly fight, though, that, listen, you might be able to kind of figure out who Craig and I are siding with already, but I'm as excited for this fight, like you had said, as I am for any other one on the card. The UFC debut of Manel Kape, it's not on Michael Chandler's level for me, but it's as close as you can possibly get.
I mean, it's right there for me. We consider this as a possible fight of the night. Let's let the cat out of the bag. We're halfway through this card. We always pick two to make it fun, so we can kind of have one for each guy, but really when two heads are better than one and we connect, this is probably the one on this card. And again, I was looking forward to this fight when, Manel Kape was supposed to take on Rogerio Bontorin. Well, unfortunately, Bontorin shattered his ankle.
Can we both agree this is a much better matchup?
Yeah, it is. And then these guys were supposed to fight in December. It fell out, so Manel Kape weighs in as an alternate for Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo. That's how much stock the UFC has in this guy. That's why we bring out the Chandler comparison, because both guys were champions outside. Manel Kape's been finished. Michael Chandler had been finished. They both weighed in as alternates for title fights in the UFC. The UFC holds these guys, Chandler and Kape, in very high regard. The shoe thing's weird, and the ring thing's kind of weird because, Fedor fought in a ring.
And he didn't do that good in a cage.
Then when he came over to a cage, it didn't go all that well. Now, was it because, it was a circular cage and not an octagon? I don't know, but they're just weird things. For Manel Kape, again, I love the stance switches. I don't like the certain periods of inactivity where I think Pantoja can take over. I love the power of Manel Kape. Again, the right hook's great, but when he's fighting from orthodox, the left hook's great. His combinations are good. I'd like to see a little bit more in terms of kicks. He will throw a body kick. You kind of worry about that with a guy like Pantoja because Pantoja, again, both of these guys are very, very powerful. Who has a better ground game? Alexandre Pantoja has a better ground game out of these two. Maybe Manel Kape surprises me, but listen, I love this fight, and I wish neither guy could lose, but unfortunately it's a fight. Maybe it ends up a draw, but unfortunately you're probably going to get a winner. You're probably going to get a loser. Again, for Manel Kape, I can't, state it enough. Ulka Sasaki fought in the UFC. Mixed results.
He wasn't great, though.
Pantoja beat him, so if it's MMA math, then automatically you know the winner. Kaya Asakura, who is, again, a huge talent. He has that win over Horiguchi, fluke or not, it's a win. And then the loss to Horiguchi. But he made it to the third round against Horiguchi.
You're going to get finished against Horiguchi.
That's going to happen. Listen, we were talking before we came on air. Who would I want to see Kyoji Horiguchi fight? Well, he beat Darren Caldwell twice. Sergio Pettis, he's probably going to beat.
Brandon Moreno's the number 1 fight, personally.
Patchy Mix, he's probably going to meet. I'd even go as far as Figueiredo or Cejudo or maybe a Dillashaw. Like, I really think Horiguchi, at the height of his powers, when he's full ACL, I think he could be great. I look at this fight, though, the Tapology votes, Matt. We always talk about them. What are the fans thinking? Well, 1,175 votes so far, 60% Pantoja, 40% Kape. The 60% that are going Pantoja, 61% by decision. The 40% going with Manel Kape, 61% have him to win by knockout. So the fans on Tapology are saying if Kape wins, more than likely knockout. If Pantoja wins, more than likely he wins by decision. If we have a look at the odds, Pantoja opened a -130 favorite, now just edged a little bit, -140. So 10-point difference. Matt sneezes, watch out. Manel Kape open +110, now at a +115. So the odds ever so slightly moving the way of Alexandre Pantoja. I love this fight, Matt. What are the final thoughts?
I love this fight too. Okay, I'm going to side with the fans, but also against them at the same time. I like Pantoja in this fight. I like him by finish as well, but here's the thing. I just think the way this fight's going to be fought is there's going to be a very high likelihood for a finish out of both guys. Manel Kape can get hit, and same thing for Pantoja. Both guys who are two of the more powerful guys who you're going to see at flyweight. I like Pantoja in this fight. I think he will be able to land one big shot. And the thing I like about Pantoja too, if Manel Kape lands a big shot and drops Pantoja, I doubt he just rushes to the ground and try to finish him. If Pantoja drops Manel Kape, he's going to be able to get on top of him, and he won't have to just rush for that ground and pound finish. He can kind of wait on top, select his shots a little bit better, and then maybe work for submission if it does end up to the mat. So although this fight is probably the best matched up fight on the whole entire card, I'm going to side with Pantoja ever so slightly.
I'm in the same camp. I'm just going to ever so slightly side with Alexandre Pantoja. If Manel Kape went out there, knocked him out in the first round, knocked him out in the second round, had the staying power in the third round to knock him out, I would not be surprised whatsoever. This, to me, pop and popcorn fight. I'm not putting anything on it. I'm going to sit back and enjoy it. You have two very high-level guys at flyweight. This should be fireworks. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going Pantoja. You're going Pantoja. But overall, a great fight on a great card. And we have some awesome fights coming up. Carlos Diego Ferreira taking on Beneil Dariush. You have Marion Renault taking on Macy Chasson. You've got a really great one in the co-main event, Sandhagen, Edgar, and in our main event, Alistair Overeem taking on Drago, Alexander Volkov. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say. Let's get into it. This is the rematch that you knew you needed. We have Diego Ferreira taking on Beneil Dariush. And listen, we talked about it at the start of our overall prediction videos. If you go back to the intro, in our Fight of the Night screens, we had Manel Kape taking on Alexandre Pantoja, with Diego Ferreira taking on Beneil Dariush. Matt, in their original fight, it was Beneil Dariush earning a decision win. And for Diego Ferreira, he loses that fight. Then he gets knocked out by Dustin Poirier. Then he wins 6 fights in a row. And it's been a long time for those 6 fights to happen. And the weird thing is, I went back and watched a lot of Diego Ferreira fights. And if you look at the last 3, I think they're really telling for this one. He beat Rustam Khabilov. Well, what's Rustam Khabilov really good at?
An awfully good wrestler.
Really good wrestler. Carlos Diego Ferreira, very high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner. So what does Diego do? Well, he snaps Khabilov's 6-fight win streak. There's a lot of win streaks that he snaps. He snaps a 6-fight win streak, and his striking looked really good. We saw a more evolved boxer out of Diego Ferreira. He doesn't really throw a ton of leg kicks, really just kind of throws the hands, pushes a pace. If he gets you against the cage, he'll take you down, and he'll wear on you. Anthony Pettis knows that. That was his last win. If you look at the fight, though, after that, so he beats Khabilov, snaps that win streak. This is the most important win I think that he has on his record, and I know you're going to touch on it, so I'll tee it up for you. When he beat Mairbek Taisumov at UFC 242, I'm from Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. I was at a Buffalo Wild Wings in, I want to say it was Bangor. I'm pretty sure it was Bangor. I'm at B-Dub-Dubs with my wife, and I watched Carlos Diego Ferreira beat Mairbek Taisumov in a way I didn't think would be possible.
So Mairbek Taisumov going into that fight was in what we'll call the Ryan Hall position, if you will, where it's, okay, this guy's insane, but he has 3 fans, so we can't really match him up with those top 15 fighters. And it was Carlos Diego Ferreira. He was a fighter. He's been around for a while, but he always needed that one big win. And I really thought they were feeding him to Taisumov. You got a guy who, his 2 previous losses was against Dariush and against Poirier, so he'd only lost to the top tier lightweights in the world, and they were finally putting him up against Taisumov, who at the time was on a 5-fight win streak, and I believe they were all by stoppage. That fight wasn't even competitive. He made Taisumov tired early, and that was that really weird event in Abu Dhabi, UFC 242, where Poirier fought Khabib, where it was like 118 degrees inside the cage. So it was just a really weird fight. Both guys were extremely sweaty before it even began. Just a weird X factor. But Carlos de Gafea, you really assumed, okay, if he's going to have any level of success, he's going to have to try to work the takedown, really wear on Taisumov, get him to the mat, and maybe can really, choke him out, work his jiu-jitsu. He outstruck him for all 15 minutes and actually showed a really diverse skill set.
In that third round, I've never seen Mairbek Taisumov look like that. Like, there were points where Fahea had him hurt. I mean, Taisumov was starting to swell up. There was one strike, I remember it in particular. He lands, and Taisumov, like, wobbles up against the cage and then wobbles back even more. Like, we had never seen that. And for context, Mairbek Taisumov is like, a lightweight Devin Clark in his legs. They're huge.
Yeah.
And Diego Ferreira was able to negate kicks. He was able to withstand any wrestling attempts. And again, the boxing really prevailed in that
And
fight.
he even threw his own kicks in that fight, too. That was we're starting to see, we'll call him the modern version of Carlos de Gafea. He does throw kicks now. He threw a lot of head kicks against Taisumov, and it is interesting. I don't know if he only threw the head kicks because his head kick or his lead back foot was Taisumov's power hand. So if he was just trying to keep the hand of Taisumov occupied, that might be the reason he was throwing so many high kicks. But that's still such a good win, especially at the time, because when you remember Taisumov going into that fight and the amount of hype he had associated with him, Diego Ferreira made it look like he did not belong in there. And it's interesting because we do have two, I would argue, primary grapplers who have really shown an extreme evolution in their striking for Benil and for Carlos Diego Ferreira.
So the last thing I want to say about Diego Ferreira, you go back and you look at the fight against Anthony Pettis. And Pettis was kind of in an odd spot because he was coming off the loss to Nate Diaz where he looked flat. Like, he just didn't look great in that fight. Comes out against Diego Ferreira. Diego just going in there with his lunch pail. He's got a ham sandwich in there, and I'm just going to walk him down.
He did eat 1 trillion leg kicks, though.
That's what I was going to say. Pettis kind of starts out, he backs up, and he gets behind the 2 black lines. That's where you normally lose a fight. But he just starts throwing side kicks, and he goes to the legs. He goes to the body. He kind of whips it up top a little bit. And Diego just walks into it. And then again, second round, Diego takes over. He ends up submitting Anthony Pettis. And that is, to me, that's his biggest win on his career. I mean, I know, he came in from Legacy. He beat Colton Smith. We're going to do a video on Colton Smith. And Terrion Ware. But you look at the fights that guy had. Woof. Beats Ramsey Nijem. Both of these guys have fights against him as well. But
Ramsey.
You look at the win streak for Carlos Diego Ferreira. OAM, Jared Gordon, Kyle Nelson. That was a weird one because he got rocked at the start. Nelson was in on short notice. Back UFC 231 in Toronto. Ends up finishing him. But that's why I look at that 3-fight sample for Diego Ferreira. This is the Diego that I've gotten in these 3 fights. It's been the same Diego. It's been an evolved version where his boxing's getting to the point where he's good with his hands, but he's great on the ground. So let's flip it over to Beneil Dariush. We talked enough about Diego Ferreira. For Beneil Dariush, he's fought a lot more since Diego has, since they fought. He beats Diego. He finishes Darren Cruikshank, rides in zone. He beats Jim Miller. He beats Michael Johnson. Gets submitted by Michael Chiesa. He finishes James Vick, ex-MMA zone. Yikes, Andre Fiallo. Way to go on the weekend. He beats Rashid Magomedov.
Which, again, I think that was a big win back at the time. Rashid Magomedov is one of those names that's kind of been forgotten since 2016. But at the time, that was a super important win for Beneil Dariush.
That was a big one. Magomedov was 19-1 at the time. Then Dariush loses to Barboza. Flying knee knockout loss. It's on a highlight reel. Not Terry Adams style, but it's still there.
It's nice.
Has a draw against Evan Dunham. Strange. Loses to Alexander Hernandez by finish in a fight where he was supposed to take on Bobby Green. Green out. Hernandez in on short notice. It was odd. But since then, he beat Thiago Moises. He finishes Drew Dober. He finishes Frank Camacho. He finishes Drakkar Klose in one of the wildest finishes you're ever going to see. Unless you saw the fight against Scott Holtzman where, listen, Benny missed weight in that one.
We're going to give him a pass.
You hate to see it. He weighed 158. Diego missed weight his third to last fight against Rustam Kabalov at 157. But Dariush misses weight against Holtzman. He goes in there and lands this crazy combination, backs Holtzman up against the cage, lets Holtzman back out a little bit, and then spinning back fist. And listen, sometimes when people land spin attacks, they're aiming for an elbow, they get a forearm. They're aiming for a fist, they end up with, a forearm. He got all fist, and he knocked Scott Holtzman down. Hot sauce, we'll call him that. And the referee knew that it was over at that point.
Well, yeah, because he just ate a full-blown spinning back fist from Beneil Dariush after eating a 40-punch combo. Weird how he went down. Okay, Beneil Dariush is my big dark horse of this division, and I understand people are going to come at me with the issues that Beneil Dariush has always had. How can a guy who suffered a knockout loss to Alexander Hernandez eventually become, and I'm not going to say he's going to become a UFC champ, but I do see Dariush as being maybe an Oliveira type character.
He's like the next Jan Blachowicz at 155.
Well, he's not ever going to become champ, so let's slow that down. But I do think Dariush on his best day can give those top 5 fighters really hard fights. And there was a reason he was supposed to be matched up with Charles Oliveira just later on last year. Now, of course, Oliveira goes on to fight Ferguson, and we all know and love Charles Oliveira for what he was able to do to Tony Ferguson. But Beneil Dariush had a really good chance in that fight, especially of beating Oliveira. Like, Dariush just doesn't have the big win associated with his win streak. I think the Jakar Close win, again, that one's really important because you look at the crazy finish now. He gets stunned and he comes back and knocks out Close. That's great. Look at the first round of that fight, though. He has Jakar's Close back the whole entire time. Like, I don't see Carlos Diego Ferreira out-grappling Beneil Dariush at all in this fight. Even if you go back and watch their first fight, Dariush is the one who has 3 takedowns to Diego Ferreira's 0. I think Dariush is the better wrestler out of these two. Now, I think Diego Ferreira uses his wrestling a lot more in MMA fights, but I don't think he can go out there and just out-grapple Dariush. I understand Dariush gets submitted by Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa is as big of a lightweight as you can possibly be, and he's going to submit people. I understand they're both guys. There's some submission losses, some submission wins, but I would definitely say Michael Chiesa and Beneil Dariush are 2 of the better overall grapplers in the UFC. I don't think Carlos Diego Ferreira is going to go out there with the same game plan he did have against Pettis. With Pettis, listen, not that there's a game plan out there to beat him, but if you follow a certain path to victory, you can end up beating him. If you take him down, get in full mount, just make him work on the ground, you can win by submission.
Not that there's a game plan out there,
but if you follow a certain game plan.
If you go to the back of a bookstore in the dusty corner, there's a Cole's Notes and you can figure it out.
Exactly. So Ferreira, I see much more of a Taisumov style from him in this fight. I do think he's going to go out there looking to strike more, which could be a really good game plan because we've seen Dariush get cracked in the past. But this version of Dariush, on the feet especially, he's really taken a dedication to his striking training, and you can really see the improvements, especially now. He does have a much more, I'll say a much better, just really toolbox of different techniques he can go to. We do see some spinning techniques from him, but just his fundamentals have improved so much. We've seen his boxing really get to a point where I don't want him to go out there and start, having a stand-up fight with Dustin Poirier anytime soon, but his striking is at least now enough of a threat where he can incorporate his wrestling in more because people are focused on his striking. I just really like the evolution that we've seen of Beneil Dariush, and it does feel like every time he gets to the top and he gets knocked down, he's still willing to reinvent himself even at 31 years old.
And the crazy thing too, Carlos Diego Ferreira, while he hasn't been super active, the 2 fights in 2019, the one in 2020, kind of stalled out near the end of the year, but now he gets an opportunity here. Dariush has been active the entire time. It's weird with Ferreira where, you're 17-2, you're 36 years old, you just turned 36. Dariush, to look at him and in my head, I think, man, this guy's old.
He's got gray hair.
He's almost 32. Like, physical peak prime is Beneil Dariush, but if he put on a tweed jacket, I think he's a professor. I really would.
That's what peak physical just performance looks like. How's that feel?
Beneil Dariush, again, the win streak's amazing. All of the finishes. Diego Ferreira just, kind of same thing. Fortis MMA, he just gets better at boxing. Nice in tight with his range. He's great. You don't have to worry about takedowns if you're Diego Ferreira against most guys because your jiu-jitsu's so good. Beneil Dariush, very well-rounded. King's MMA, we talk about Rafael Cordero. Mike Tyson had a draw against Roy Jones Jr. thanks to Rafael Cordero. But again, you want to talk somebody with really good boxing fundamentals, and it's not really the best example, but Calvin Gastelum. You look at a guy like Gastelum, really good with his range when he's on and when he really gets it. Beneil Dariush, same thing. But we've seen a lot of great strikers from Kings. We talked about Joselyne Edwards on this card. We've talked about Sabina Mazow on this card.
We're skipping over the most obvious pick.
We're talking about Marvin Vettori from Kings.
Giga Chikadze, their best
striker. And
striker.
Giga Chikadze as well, especially in the lower weight classes with Giga. So for Beneil Dariush, the methods are there. For Diego Ferreira, the methods are there. So let's talk about the fan vote over on Topology. Get an idea what people are thinking. 1,252 total votes, 67% Dariush, 40% saying he's going to win by decision, 47% saying he's going to win by knockout. For the third of fans that thought Ferreira could win or that think Ferreira could win, 60% by decision. Bit of a surprise to me that if Ferreira is going to get the win by decision. Now, we have seen him win by decision more so than we have seen Dariush.
It's the only way I see him winning.
But I think if Ferreira goes out there with a strike-heavy game plan to push a big pace, we've seen Dariush get cracked. There's an opportunity for Ferreira to get a finish in this one. So let's have a look at the odds. while you blink. Hopefully you blink. Thank you.
I disagree with that point, but that's fine.
Fahea opened to minus 125. He's now at a minus 126 on best fight odds when they average him out. For Dariush, plus 105 to plus 102. So Dariush the underdog, Fahea the favorite. Man, I love this fight. This is a really tricky one here.
So I love this fight too. Again, there is a path to victory for both guys. I don't agree with the fact that Fahea needs a stoppage in this because, again, you have to understand the level of strikers that have knocked out Beneil Dariush. And I always go back to what Luke Thomas said about the Edson Barbosa loss. Edson Barbosa is such a good striker that he was able to take all of this into consideration before he threw that flying knee against Beneil Dariush. He had eaten enough jabs against Dariush and had such a good understanding of the distance between the two of them that Dariush was faking a takedown after some of his jabs and not faking a takedown after others. Edson Barbosa was able to judge which jabs were setting up the takedown attempts and which jabs were just jabs, and he was able to take all that into consideration and throw the perfect flying knee at the perfect time. I don't think CDF's going to be able to do that. And listen, Alexandre Hernandez knocked out Dariush. He went out there and caught him with a good shot early. That can happen to anybody.
Jakar Close caught him.
Jakar Close is a good striker, though, and he uses his striking at range, where Carlos Tega Fahea, if he's going to land with power, he has to almost ramp himself into his shots, where the majority of the time we see Dariush get hit is on his counter shots, where he's able to get countered. I don't think Fahea has enough trunk movement or the head movement to really make Dariush pay for some of those. I think Dariush outstrikes him on the feet, though, 10 days out of 10. I really do. I think he's got the wrestling advantage so that on the defense, he can make Fahea work enough so that Fahea's cardio won't really be that big of an asset, especially as the fight goes on, because this is interesting. These are two guys who love to huff and puff after the first round. Both have great cardio, though, and Carlos Tega Fahea, it was the bit of the story throughout his career where, he gets tired. Not really. Like, he can keep a really high pace throughout all 15 minutes. It's not something I'm worried about in this fight at all. I really doubt either guy has the game plan to really make the other one tired and be able to capitalize over that. I'm going to pick Dariush, though. I don't know if I'm that confident in his ability to TKO Carlos Tega Fahea, but I do think on the feet, he's going to offer enough looks to CDF so that he won't just be able to go in there, go for takedowns. He's going to make him work, and I do think some big power shots will open up by the end of the fight.
That's the thing. I mean, for Diego Fahea, again, I would expect him, if he's going to get a win, I don't know, maybe by decision. He has decent volume.
I think he needs to wrestle, personally.
Yeah, I would think you would need to wrestle him from a position like that. Maybe you go for a submission. Beneil Dariush is a good defensive grappler. That's the other thing. With Diego Fahea, and you touched on it a bit, when he goes forward, I talked about it, he marches down his opponents. Kabilov, Taisumov, even Pettis, really, to get in close. He's kind of square when he does it, so you can hit him. But again, he does have good boxing. He does have good counters. So, listen, this is a rematch of two guys that have very high-level wins on great win streaks. So, again, if you close your eyes and you wake up the next morning and Beneil Dariush wins, great. And if Diego Fahea wins, that could happen too. It is a tough one to try and figure out. I like Beneil Dariush as well. I like the pop on the end of his shots. He's really good at using his range, like you said. I mean, Edson Barbosa was able to figure him out, but, Edson Barbosa is one of the greatest uncrowned champs at 55.
Like, just, it is wild to me, though. Like, that's the striking IQ of Edson Barbosa. He's able to take all of that into consideration in a massive arena full of people cheering his name, and he's still able to get the knockout. I just don't think Carlos Tega Fahea can make Dariush pay for those problems.
So for me, I'm going with Dariush. I love the power. I love the defensive grappling. But this is just an awesome fight. It's a fight of the night contender on our card. We're going to sit back. We're going to watch this. And at the end of the night, maybe you'll light a cigar. You just enjoy it. It's going to be a great one.
Neither one of us smoke cigars.
I'm going with Dariush. You're going with Dariush. When I got married, I did. And I'm looking forward to this one. We got a great card coming up. You have Sandhagen taking on Edgar in the co-main. You have Renault taking on Macy Chasson. That's a high-level one at bantamweight. And in our main event slot, you have the Demolition Man taking on Drago. Overeem and Volkovs. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. Really interesting fight at women's bantamweight. We have a woman that's going to step into the cage at 43 years, 7 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days old, and Marion Renault on a 3-fight losing streak, taking on Macy Chasson, who won the Ultimate Fighter Season 28. Like, my guy, where ya at, Juan Espino? And for Macy Chasson in the UFC, it's been a good run. She beat Pani Kanzad to win that title, if you want to call it a title, but the tournament championship. She knocks out Gina Mazzani. She knocks out Sarah Morris. She loses to the elbow queen, Alina Landsberg, and then she beats Shanna Young, who was coming in on short notice. She had fought at flyweight, at bantamweight in the past, but that was a really good statement win for Macy Chasson. That was a good confidence builder. It's been a while. It's been almost 2 years since we saw her last in the cage coming out of Fortis MMA. Now, I said for Marion Renault, she's almost 44 years old and she's on a 3-fight losing streak. But this fight's a lot more competitive than just those numbers. Because if you look at that 3-fight losing streak, well, she lost to Kat Zingano 2.5 years ago. And she got dominated in that one. And her last loss was to Raquel Pennington. Well, she got dominated in that one. But the middle loss to Yana Kunitskaya, I went back, I checked it out on MMA Decisions. The majority of the MMA media members over there, the panelists, if you will, they scored that fight for Kunitskaya. I was in the minority and I had it for Renault because she cracked Yana Kunitskaya and had her really hurt. And I had 2 rounds for Renault versus, the 2 that most had scored it for Kunitskaya. There were some people that agreed with me. But all that to say, it was a halfway competitive fight against a decent fighter.
Oh, 100%. And here's the great thing about Marion Renault. One of the more underrated strikers in the division. And the Sarah McCann fight, I always go back to that because Sarah McCann is dominating Marion Renault. And here's the thing you have to know about Renault. She is phenomenal at jiu-jitsu. She's terrible at wrestling. She is the bizarro version of Sarah McCann. And you see it happen in their fight where Sarah McCann is able to get on top and control her from on top. Marion Renault, we talked with Louis Smolka effect. It's kind of the Marion Renault effect. She's really good at jiu-jitsu, but she will just stay on her back and have these long periods of inactivity where she's giving up time. And we all know what a judge takes into consideration more than just time off their back. Yeah, unless you're Brian Ortega off your back, the person in your guard is probably going to be winning those positions. Now, Marion Renault in the second round of that fight shows off what she is so good at. She's got big pop in her shots. And it's weird because, again, talk about the fact she's almost 44 years old. She is a gym teacher. She beats the brakes off every other gym teacher in America, if not all of North America, because she does have that really nice power on the end of her shots. When she gets in top position, especially on the mat, she's got phenomenal submissions. I really like her triangle choke, but we did see the Kat Zingano fight I always go back to, because Kat Zingano just kind of throws her down and takes her down and accumulates a lot of top control, but doesn't do a lot with it, because if you do give Marion Renault space, she does have good sweeps. She can get a submission of her own. But when fighters go in there and they do fight more of a wrestling-oriented, kind of safe game plan, if you will, you can really neutralize a lot of the good weapons of Marion Renault, where Macy Chasson, she does have great striking. She's great from top position. We see her elbows too. But Macy's bread and butter, she's great in the clinch. She's got really good power in the clinch. We saw that in the Gina Mazzani fight. And listen, Gina Mazzani's not the best fighter you're ever going to go out there and fight. But it's kind of the theme of Macy's record, where she has wins over people she should be beating. It's not like she's going out there and has any surprising win where you're like, oh wow, she knocked out Valentina.
Penny Kanzad's probably the best one.
It's a good win, don't get me wrong, but beating Penny Kanzad doesn't really tell me a lot about your long-term future in the division, and it always is curious too, because they fought at 145. That season of The Ultimate Fighter was heavy hitters, so it was the women's featherweight with the men's heavyweight. She looked great in that season, and I really like the striking of Chasson. I just don't really know where I could put her at skill level-wise, because the Lena Landsberg loss is a bad one. And I think Lena Landsberg's a fairly good MMA fighter. She's kind of good at everything. We talk about the elbows. She's the elbow queen. But she's got good wrestling. She's got good clinch work, good distance striking. She doesn't really excel at anything, I wouldn't say. She's kind of dominated Macy at every area of the fight. She used the clinch against Chasson. She was able to take her down. She was able to really get some top control of her own. So although I really like Macy in this fight, I like her youth, I like her distance striking, she's by far the more heavy-handed out of the two, even though I do think we should pay respect to the striking power of Marion Renault. I just don't really know what version of either fighter I'm going to get. Like, every version of Marion Renault I think of is like, oh wow, that fight was 3 years ago. And for Macy, it's, well, your peak is really, really good, but I just haven't seen you beat anyone on Marion Renault's level. So hopefully for Macy Chasson, this is our big win to really get her on people's radar. But there's just so many question marks going into this fight that I have a hard time thinking that Macy is a 2-1 favorite over Marion Renault, even at the age of 43.
And when I look at, Macy Chasson's record, so you beat Penny Kanzad on the Ultimate Fighter at 145. The Penny Kanzad that fought on that Ultimate Fighter and today's Penny Kanzad in that short 2 years, she's a much better fighter, especially at 35. I know I was excited about her before that season of The Ultimate Fighter, and truth be told, and cards on the table. Again, I like Juan Espino a lot, and it was great on The Ultimate Fighter, but I'm not a big Ultimate Fighter guy. But Penny Kanzad, I was excited before the season. Gina Mazzani win, below Kanzad, I would say. Then you look at the win over Sarah Morris, below Kanzad, but that's in my mind's eye. She loses to Landsberg, who's a 10 to 15 bantamweight, and then you beat Shanna Young, that was on short notice. I know, Macy Chasson, if you look at her record, she was supposed to fight Sajara Eubanks back last year. That fight fell out. Chasson withdrew. And, obviously less than a good thing that you see a fighter withdraw out of a fight like that. Now taking on Marion Renault, who, again, I set it up this way. You're almost 44. You're on a 3-fight losing streak. She's 9-6-1 overall. I think she has a good chance in this fight.
Yeah,
Like,
stylistically, it's great for her.
You can't count Marion Renault out of this fight. And if you look at the odds, again, she is an underdog. Renault opened a plus 190. She's now a plus 173. Macy Chasson opened a minus 225. She's now a minus 217. Over on Tapology, we have a pretty good sample size on this one to see what the fans are thinking. 1,190, 83% Chasson, with 72% predicting her to win by decision. I think under normal circumstances, if Macy Chasson comes in here like we know she can, she's probably going to beat Marion Renault by decision. It's a tricky one, though. It really is.
I agree with everything you said. Like, the best version of Macy Chasson should go out there and just outstrike Marion Renault, not really get into a lot of grappling exchanges with her. And I hate to say play it safe, because, again, she could get the TKO at this weight class. One of the more heavy-handed women, especially at 135. I'm much more comfortable with your pick. I do like her by decision. I think she'll just do enough every single round. Listen, you're not going to be that impressed by Macy in this fight, I don't think. I think she is going to have to fight a smart fight, not just go out there and think, okay, this is the biggest name opponent I've ever been against. Let's go out there and try to make a really nice statement win. I think she just has to go out there looking for the win. Marion Renault, yes, she's on a 3-fight losing streak. Yes, she's 42, but she is not an easy fight for anybody. And if
44.
For almost 44, which is wild. But if she's able to get top position on Macy, it's going to be an interesting fight. I don't love the odds where they are. I think they should be closer, but I do agree with you. I think Macy by decision is probably a good pick.
Matt, really looking forward to this one. We're both going with Macy Chasson to get the win. We have a great co-main event. Frankie Edgar taking on Cory Sandhagen. A great main event with Alistair Overeem taking on Drago, Alexandre Volkov. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it. I put my glasses on because I mean business, and support for Fight Night Picks is brought to you by Manscaped, who's the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Matt, the fans of Fight Night Picks have given back. They've been checking out Manscaped. They've been using that promo code FNP for 20% off their orders and free shipping, and we're going to have some new things with Manscaped rolling out in February. But listen, we've all been there. You're shaving your nuts in the shower like Craig Allen. And you nick your nuts.
Allen, to be honest.
You nick your nuts. And listen, I'm a shower guy. When I shave my nuts, that much is true. And we've all been there. You don't want to nick your nuts. It ruins your day. Like, it ruins your whole day. It's just terrible. And the trouble is, you can't get enough light when you're in the shower and you're shaving your nuts. And I don't know how you shave your face, but hopefully you didn't use your Lawnmower 3.0. But I will tell you, if you shave your nuts with it, it's going to work out great. They've redesigned the electric trimmer. And listen, they perfected the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created. Like I said, Lawnmower 3.0 just released in Canada, Australia, and the UK. It's a third generation trimmer featuring a cutting edge ceramic blade. It's right there to reduce grooming accidents. And listen, straight up waterproof technology. There's an LED light just like that. So when you're shaving your face or your nuts, but hopefully your nuts, it's going to work out great. 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology. And I talked about it around the holiday season, but listen, they have a great charging stand. And whatever part of the world you're in, maybe you're in Australia or New Zealand, you can toss this one down on your vanity. People wait the 2 weeks, they come over, they hang out, and look what they can see. If you're having a Zoom call with your boss and you just happen to be around that bathroom vanity, or you want to show it off in your dresser, on your desk, put it on that charging stand. It works great. But if you order the Perfect Package 3.0, you're going to get the leather carrying case. It's a great carrying case. And listen,
high quality.
Everybody needs a nice toiletry bag. This is one of them. You're going to get the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant. It's like a nice salve. You put it on in the morning. You're going to have a nice day. Listen, I toss that stuff on there like...
it's a confidence boost.
Like that hot sauce that's out there in the world, and it works great. You have the Crop Reviver Ball Toner. You talk about a nice little spritz. And again, you're going to have a nice day. And then the other thing that they have, the Weed Whacker. Now listen, I've done this countless times so far on the Fight Night Picks broadcast, but toss that in there, you get that ear hair, you get that nose hair, it works great. I'm a nose hair guy, and listen, I bought the cheap trimmers before, whether it's the ball hair trimmer or the nose hair trimmer from the department store. A, they don't work well in the shower because they rust, but B, these tend to work a lot better. So, I mean, it's just a great package. You want to keep that bush and tush clean. Let's get 20% off and free shipping with the code FNP at manscaped.com. Make your testies your besties. Do you have a good testimonial off these products?
They work. That's all I can say. Like, we've had them for a while now. They still work. They're really good. And yeah, you don't want that rusty trimmer down there. You want that high-quality ceramic. We wouldn't peddle something that we don't believe in. These things do work.
So get 20% off and free shipping with code FNP at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code FNP. Your balls will thank you. Let's keep getting into it. Big time fight in our co-main event. We have a great one at bantamweight. Two very highly ranked fighters. The Sandman, Cory Sandhagen, representing Colorado, taking on the answer, Frankie Edgar. Matt, Frankie Edgar has so many all-time UFC records. He's up there in the top 10s. I'm going to give you a few of them right off the bat. He has the third most decision wins in UFC history at 11. He's tied for 8th in bonuses at 11. He has the third most total strikes landed in the UFC. Number 1, Max Holloway. Number 3, Frankie Edgar with 2,339. But the biggest number on Frankie Edgar's record is his total fight time. 7 hours, 40 minutes, and 51 seconds. And if you look at his average fight time, Frankie Edgar fights more than the 15 minutes. It's somewhere in the 17 minutes and 4 seconds.
Whack.
It's amazing the career this guy's put together. I can't overstate it, I don't think. Former lightweight champ. He's fighting at bantamweight now. He was undersized at lightweight. He was almost undersized at featherweight.
He was.
And now he's here at bantamweight. And listen, I know the record in the last 5 is somewhat salty. He's 2-3. Lost to Brian Ortega. Beat Cub Swanson. Lost to Holloway. Lost to the Korean Zombie. Beat Pedro Munoz by split decision. Listen, I had Pedro to win it, but it was a close fight. It really was. So you can make an argument either way. But what I did learn from Frankie Edgar in his bantamweight debut in that fight, he looked pretty good.
He did. And again, whether you think he won or lost to Pedro Munoz, he fought in a way that says, oh, wow, that was a Frankie Edgar fight. Did he get tired at all in that fight? No. Did he keep an insanely high output throughout that fight? Yeah. And did he get hit by shots that would knock out a horse, but for some reason don't seem to affect Frankie Edgar? All 3 of those things happened.
Oh, yeah.
You're in for a Frankie Edgar fight. And the Pedro Munoz fight was interesting, too, because Edgar ate so many of those calf kicks and so many leg kicks, and they definitely were starting to affect him near the end of that fight. But that tells you really all you need to know about Frankie Edgar. He ate 40 calf kicks from Pedro Munoz and was still a fresh fighter in minute 20 to 25 of their fight. He brings in some of the best cardio the UFC has ever seen, and again, a guy fighting 17-minute fights is like that one-year Wilt Chamberlain averaged 48.2 minutes a game. It's because he just played every minute of every game, and a couple of games went to overtime. That's really what Frankie Edgar's been doing. And when I think of main event 5-round fighters, I always think of Frankie Edgar because he's a perfect name to just throw into, listen, we need a fight night main event. Who can Frankie Edgar fight? And it's always going to be an entertaining fight. You're always going to get something good from it. And Frankie Edgar is always near the top of the division. Something big is going to happen for the winner. This is a strange fight. And again, this fight, when I think about it less of Cory Sandhagen fighting Frankie Edgar, and I just think, okay, who's been able to beat Frankie Edgar in the past? Well, tall, rangy strikers do seem to give him trouble. But then I ask myself, okay, well, what adversity has Cory Sandhagen faced? He does get taken down. Now, here's the good thing. He's a good enough grappler that he can create scrambles, and he can create enough space to at least make his way back up to the feet. We saw Aljamain Sterling take him down, control him, and it's nothing against the grappling Cory Sandhagen by any means. He's a good grappler, and he's a great MMA grappler. If you grapple Aljamain Sterling, you're probably going to end up tapping, and that's how the fight's going to end. But Frankie Edgar can employ a very similar game plan to Aljamain Sterling. Now, I'm not going to say he's going to go out there, take down Cory Sandhagen, and take his back in 90 seconds and choke him out, because that'd be a ridiculous prediction to make. But I think that wrestling of Frankie Edgar can definitely take Cory Sandhagen down. The question I keep on coming back to is, how long does it take for Cory Sandhagen to get back up to his feet? Because this is only a 3-round fight, and for Frankie Edgar, he's used to fighting 25 minutes. We're going to see an absurd output from him anyways, because you're normally doing a 25-minute fight, but he now has 10 less minutes to fight with, and he's probably going to keep a very similar output. So if Cory Sandhagen can't do anything early on to at least hurt Frankie Edgar, I don't know how you can make Cory Sandhagen a minus 415 favorite. Could he go out there and knock him out in 10 seconds? Of course he could. Brian Ortega knocked out Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar gets wobbled. I just have a very hard time saying that Cory Sandhagen should be a 4-1 favorite over Frankie Edgar.
The wildest thing, and again, people talk about this in the comments section every now and again, so let's talk about it. When you see the odds, I match those up with Tapology predictions. Why? Because these are the hardest of the hardcore MMA fans that take time out of their day to post a prediction. Now, are they all right? No. A lot of the time they are, but they're not always right. But it's a good litmus test as to, okay, if fighter X is such a big favorite, what are the fans thinking? If it's a total, polar opposite, well, that's a talking point, and that's pretty interesting. Cory Sandhagen opened a sizable favorite, 3-1 favorite. He's now minus 433 average on best fight odds. Edgar opened plus 250, now at a plus 325. The Tapology odds, 83% Sandhagen, 48% by decision, 43% by knockout. The 17% that have Edgar to win, 75% by decision. Listen, the 43% of 83% that pick Sandhagen to win What are you talking about? Like, by submission, Frankie Edgar has spent 7 hours, 40 minutes, and 51 seconds in the UFC's octagon, and he's never been submitted one time. Why do you think Cory Sandhagen's the guy? You let me know in the comments section. Because listen, it's entirely possible. You look at Cory Sandhagen's record.
Is it though?
He finishes Austin Arnett in his debut, 2018. He finishes Yuri Alcantara, which that was kind of a weird fight because
he takes damage.
Yuri Alcantara, later on in his career, he was a really good jiu-jitsu ace, but as he got later on in his career, he started to get finished. He submits Mario Bautista. That's a great win. Beats John Lineker by split decision. Takes some damage.
John Lineker almost submits him too, and I think that's something we should talk about.
It's a lot of damage, as Phil Swift would say. He beats Rafael Sunsao by decision. He gets taken down in that fight by Sunsao, but a Sunsao's power bar goes down. Not like Garbrandt goes down, but, he beats him. Loses to Sterling in the first minute and a half, and then he beats Marlon Moraes in one of the coolest knockouts I've seen in a while. And Marlon's, trademark of late is getting finished. So for Sandhagen, being that big of a favorite, you're right. I don't see it. I saw it over in the comments section, our YouTube community tab, because we normally post polls there. You can find polls on our Instagram too at Fight Night Picks. But in the YouTube community tab, a lot of people are saying, Frankie Edgar, maybe there's a good possibility with those plus odds. I wouldn't disagree. I'm probably going to stay away from this fight. But it is interesting to see such a huge shift for Cory Sandhagen where, Edgar, he's 2-3 in his last 5. But he hasn't totally fallen off a cliff.
Oh, no, not by any means. And that's kind of the fun thing about Frankie Edgar. Even in this later stage of his career, he's putting on extremely competitive fights with the best guys in the division. So I understand why people are confident with Sandhagen. Everyone remembers that highlight reel KO of Marlon, how he points out that he breaks his orbital with a question mark kick, and wheel kicks him Edson Barbosa style. When you look at the record of Cory Sandhagen, and I hate doing this to records, but it's kind of the truth, you could pick out... There's little caveats along with a lot of his wins. Like Marlon Moraes, well, he can't really take a shot. Cory Sandhagen knocks him out. You lose to Aljamain Sterling, and then you beat Rafael Sunsao, who it was not in his prime by any means at that stage in his career, but he still had a high ranking associated with his name. So that win gets your name up into the top of the rankings. And your other top win is a split decision over John Lineker, where at the time of watching it, I thought Lineker won. Upon further review, I do think Sandhagen won 2 of those rounds. But in the third round of that fight, it's just John Lineker hitting Cory Sandhagen in the head. Yep. And then he almost chokes him out like Damian Maia, Rick Story style, where a bunch of blood comes out of poor Cory Sandhagen's nose. It's not that I don't think Cory Sandhagen can win this fight, and I'm going to let you know this right now. If he knocks out Frankie Edgar, I'm on board. Like, this is it. You can't beat Frankie Edgar and not convince me you are a top-tier world-class fighter. I'm going to pick Frankie Edgar in this fight. I never thought I'd say that, but I do think the wrestling of Frankie Edgar is being overlooked. I think the grappling of Frankie Edgar is also being overlooked. On the feet, Cory Sandhagen will have success, but we've seen Cory Sandhagen struggle in moments against guys who can do what Frankie Edgar does. Can Frankie Edgar go out there and take down Cory Sandhagen? Without a doubt. And I think if he gets one takedown, and if Cory Sandhagen is a little complacent off his back, if he's a little too comfortable and, looking for scrambles when he shouldn't be, I think Frankie Edgar can really make him pay. So I'm not going to predict not a Yair Rodriguez style humbling, if you will, but I do think Frankie Edgar is going to be able to win this fight. And it's going to be one of them y'all must have forgot. Now, maybe I'm not as high as Cory Sandhagen as I should be. Please let me know if I'm being really dumb right now. But I'm going to pick Frankie Edgar, and I like him as an underdog. I'm probably not going to put any money on this for full transparency, but as an underdog pick, I do like Edgar.
This is a weird one because, again, I saw that in the community tab as well. The comparisons between Sandhagen and Rodriguez. Rodriguez... hardcore striker, 0 takedown defense.
He's not bad anymore.
Not a lot of grappling, credentials that way. And where is he now? But
lying about his whereabouts.
If I look at Cory Sandhagen, great jiu-jitsu. Really, really creative. One of the more creative guys that we see because his striking, when he's flowing, it's great. And it's really unorthodox. So it's hard to get a good read off of Cory Sandhagen. Unless you're a guy that moves forward in a straight line, which is weird because you'd think with a guy that's so dynamic, like we talked about that, Michael Chandler, Dan Hooker. How would Dan Hooker win? Elbows up the middle, knees up the middle, lots of straight shots up the middle. How would Cory Sandhagen win? Lots of stuff up the middle, with guys that move in straight lines, but guys that move in straight lines have a lot of success. It's an odd thing, and it happened to Hooker, and it can happen to Sandhagen. That's the other thing. Sandhagen off his back. I'm cool with it, but with Frankie Edgar,
no, you're not.
We talked about it with certain fighters. Like, we talked about it early on in this card, if you get the chance to watch it, or maybe you haven't. The fight that Dennis Bondar has against Ode Osborne. I'm going to make a comparison here. with Dennis Bondar, if he takes Ode Osborne down, he's going to be looking to control for position. He doesn't land a lot of strikes. We talked about it with Carlos Diego Ferreira. Frankie Edgar takes down Cory Sandhagen. He's going to look to try and end the fight. It's not like we're just hunting for position like Cody Stamann does.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to disagree with, and I got to put this in, Cory Sandhagen is not that good off of his back. He's okay at best, but Cory Sandhagen, him off his back's not a position I'm comfortable with him in, especially not against any of the elite at bantamweight. I agree, he's a good grappler, don't get me wrong, but him on his back, we saw Aljamain Sterling somewhat expose him. He will make mistakes on the ground, especially in the grappling against top-level grapplers. Frankie Edgar, I'll say even, like, Jose Aldo won't go there, but he would have the IQ to get into those positions. I agree with some of what you're saying about Cory Sandhagen, but I don't think he is a submission threat at all against the top tier of the bantamweight division.
Oh boy, I think a lot of people disagree.
That's fine.
But overall, making the pick and really getting to the point and the crux of it, I'm going to side with Frankie Edgar ever so slightly in this fight. Again, I like Sandhagen's striking. I like his jiu-jitsu. I like how creative he is. Frankie Edgar has that weird X factor, the fact that he had that fight against Pedro Munoz where obviously a lot of people counted him out. I'm one of those people that's included, full transparency. And listen, I don't think that he won that fight. I thought Munoz won 3 of the rounds. Edgar did, again, look good in the last 2. That's the thing. And he keeps his output there. In a 3-round fight, how's that going to translate? We talk about that with a lot of fighters, Jose Aldo included. I think it's going to work for Frankie Edgar here, oddly enough. And I think if he gets off to a fast pace and a quick pace, and he wears on Cory Sandhagen, there's a good opportunity to win. So, going against popular belief, going against the odds, and the picks on Tapology, we're both going with Frankie Edgar in this fight. Are we madmen? What are you thinking down below in the comments section? You let us know. And, you know, for better or for worse, hopefully the analysis suited you. Now, in our main event, we have a great fight coming up between Alistair Overeem and Alexandre Volkov, Drago, and the Demolition Man. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it. Big time fight. In our main event, we have the Demolition Man, Alistair Overeem. This guy had been there and done that with pride. He became the Strikeforce heavyweight champ. He beat Brock Lesnar in his UFC debut, and he's had a heck of a career. You look at it, the total fight numbers, it's absolutely insane that this guy's still doing it at such a high level and still competing at such a high level. Alistair Overeem out of the Netherlands taking on Russia's Drago, Alexandre Volkov. And since Volkov's really kind of adopted the nickname and really kind of got his confidence and his footing under him, he's looked amazing. And I know in his last 5 fights, he's 3-2, but he's taken on a high level of competition, whether it was with Bellator or M1 Global or here with the UFC. And again, you talk about mixed results, but let's focus on the losses. By knockout to Derek Lewis, where he was beating Derek Lewis until the end of the 3rd round. It was a Hail Mary by Lewis, and he loses. And Curtis Blades, and that's a fight, I know we're going to get into it. I see it a lot, I was going to say quite a bit, but a lot differently than a lot of people do. And I can hear the arguments both ways. But let's focus on the wins. Fabrizio Verdum, in a fight where Verdum was riding the 2nd career wave high.
That was early in the days of Craig betting on MMA, and I remember vividly that one coming back to bite him.
That was a bad one. He beat Greg Hardy in a fight where Hardy had some success, maybe broke his hand, but still, he wins that one. And then he beats Walt Harris's last time out, knocks him out in that one, and looked great.
He did, and that was the thing about Volkov, too. This is the thing I love about this fight, and I have to say this first. Heavyweights should not be in main event fights. I don't like heavyweights fighting 25 minutes. These are 2 of the heavyweights who I love fighting for 25 minutes, though. Like, Alexandre Volkov has phenomenal cardio for a heavyweight. And yes, he lost in the Blades fight. He got taken down 1,000 times. But that fight, I do think there's a lot of positives to draw from. And the fact that Volkov was still quite fresh in the 4th and 5th round after defending 15 takedowns, I think is a really important fact, because it does show off just how good his cardio is, even for being a 6'7" heavyweight. And we saw... maybe my new favorite heavyweight, thick boy Alexandre Volkov, is here to stay. The man that we saw fight Walt Harris.
Thick boy, tatted up.
He's
a bad boy.
He's having a midlife crisis, but he might be having it in the best way possible. Because from upgrades in the tattoo game, I can't really say just how bad that manta ray was compared to the nice piece of artwork he has on his back all of a sudden.
I mean, Ben Affleck's here. Alexandre Volkov's way up there.
It's a beautiful piece.
Looks great. Can't talk about it enough.
So for Drago and Volkov, he's got phenomenal cardio, and I'm confident he can go a hard 5 rounds. Well, I mean, Alistair Overeem's been doing it since really the year I was born. Alistair Overeem made his debut in 1999. I was born in November of 1998. Alistair Overeem's been fighting for as many years as I've been doing things on this earth, and that is an absolutely astounding fact to me. But Overeem, even at this advanced age, he is finally 40, which is wild because it feels like he's been 40 for the last 5 years. But he can still go those hard 5 rounds, and we've seen it fight after fight. Overeem, I'll liken him to a Frankie Edgar, where it's, okay, we have a fight night slot that needs filled. Alistair Overeem can fight another guy in the top 10, and it's going to sell enough tickets, and it's going to do enough viewers on TV that we can always justify having him in the main event. This fight's odd because everything Overeem does well suggests that he should kind of run over Alexander Volkov in this fight. Volkov doesn't defend the takedown particularly well. He's gotten a lot better defensively on the ground. That's something we do have to talk about because at the start of his UFC career, and really just throughout the earlier part of his MMA career, and I say earlier part, it took him a while to get into the UFC, but it seems like it has taken even his UFC time to adjust to it. His defensive grappling has improved a lot, and in the Verdum fight, yes, he gets taken down, and yes, he does get put in a lot of bad positions, but the fact that he's never really sunken into a submission throughout that fight, he's doing well enough defensively that, yes, Verdum's able to take him down, but he's not taking any major damage, he's not really getting himself into any sticky situations.
He did better than Alexander Gustafsson.
He really did. So defensively for Volkov, Overeem might be able to go out there and take him down. I don't doubt it, and I'm sure it's part of his game plan. But even if it takes him down, I don't think we're going to see the same story that we saw in the Walt Harris or the Augusto Sakai fight, where it's just Overeem with his phenomenal ground and pound and top pressure, just lighting up Volkov on the mat. I think Volkov, his cardio is phenomenal, so it will allow him to just keep on working every time Overeem gets him down to the ground, and he's not going to constantly have to worry about, okay, if I do really expend my energy here, will I be tired later on in the fight? Because Walt Harris hits Overeem with a bomb, gets tired trying to finish him, gets finished on the mat. Augusto Sakai is doing all right throughout the fight, but once his cardio starts to fade, Overeem really takes over. Overeem won't have that big of an advantage in the cardio in this fight. And it's interesting because Overeem, what are his 2 defaults? Well, if the fight's not going well, I can clinch up with my opponent, normally knee them in the body a million times, or I can outlast them with my cardio. He doesn't really have the cardio to outlast Volkov in this fight because no one at heavyweight does. And in the clinch, Overeem might have success, but in the clinch is honestly where I can see Volkov having some of his success. He's got nice uppercuts, he's got good knees. So this fight's really interesting because both guys should have success in similar ranges.
It's a tricky one too, and this is the conversation that I've seen a lot out there, especially YouTube community tab here. Make sure you check it out. We toss out polls, all kinds of neat stuff. A lot of people, going with Overeem and a lot of people going with Volkov. And the ones that are going with Volkov are very vocal in the fact that in the fight that Overeem had against Augusto Sakai's last time out there, it was a fight night main event. You had Overeem finishing Sakai at the beginning stages of the 5th round. Sakai outlanded him in terms of significant strikes and overall total strikes, which I found surprising because in my mind's eye, thinking about it before doing any of the research, man, Alistair Overeem won that fight easy. Beat the heck out of old Augusto Sakai. And he did, and he definitely landed the more meaningful shots, the more powerful shots, which is weird because significant strikes, it's a whole other ballgame. His takedowns were good, and they were kind of unorthodox. They were a little weird. In the 5th round, Sakai was totally depleted. Overeem just kind of dumps him down, gets on top, lands some good shots. Same thing with the Walt Harris fight.
Stefan Struve fight, he does the same thing.
Finishes him. Stefan Struve. And then we look at the last 5. Okay, the loss to Jairzinho. He beat him until the end, and then he got finished, just like Derek Lewis when he beat Alexander Volkov. Before that, Alexei Oleinik, that one wasn't even close. And then the fight against Sergey Pavlovich. We get this guy that's been eating the same stuff that Overeem was eating in 2010. He's going to come in here like, pick a wrestler.
Chris Masterson.
Just Chris Masters going for the master lock. But Chris Masters and Overeem just beat the brakes off of Sergey Pavlovich. He beat him bad and quickly, too.
And how did he do it? Because again, this is the thing about Overeem, especially in this last 5 fights. Where is all of his success coming from? Well, he ground and pounds Sergey Pavlovich. He ground and pounds Jairzinho until he doesn't. Ground and pounds Augusto Sakai. And ground and pounds Walt Harris. I'm sensing a bit of a theme here.
He clips a lot of guys, and if they falter at all, we're bringing them down. We're going to hammer away. And that's the thing. A lot of people for the longest time talked about the submission wins of Alistair Overeem, and he has plenty of them. And they talk about the offensive grappling, but we never really see it. But what we have seen later on in his career, especially after that Stipe fight, UFC 203, is the fact that Alistair Overeem has started to wrestle a little bit more. And I think the key to that is that move to elevation, working with Curtis Blades. You have a perfect little bit of a game plan. And again, here's where I deviate with a lot of people that really liked a lot that Alexander Volkov brought to the table in the Blades fight. Curtis Blades went 14-25 in takedown attempts. When was the last time somebody had 14 successful takedowns in a fight? Merab had that not that long ago. Merab and Curtis Blades, it doesn't happen all that often. And later on in that fight, Curtis Blades did tire, and Volkov started to have a little bit of success on the feet. And I remember when I scored that fight, and going back, I had it 4-1 for Blades. I get an argument, maybe 3-2, whatever. I had it 4-1 for Blades, and I thought Blades looked really good in that fight, and I didn't love what I saw out of Volkov. Again, the staying power and the cardio, they're there for sure, but I thought Blades ran away with that fight, and Volkov didn't look great. But that's a skill set that a guy like Volkov would struggle against.
No, exactly. And here's the thing. I think you're looking at the right stats, but I don't know if you're looking at them the right way. I agree with everything you said. I can't disagree with it. Volkov didn't take any damage from the ground and pound, though, and I think that's the most important thing about this fight. Can Overeem take down Volkov? I'm sure he can at some point. I just don't think he can damage Volkov on the ground like he's been able to damage a lot of his past opponents, and that's what it comes down to for Overeem. On the feet, could Overeem knock out Volkov? Of course he could. Alistair Overeem's one of the most technical and powerful strikers we've ever seen in the heavyweight division. Really, we've ever seen in MMA. He was the original Israel Adesanya making that transition over to MMA, if you will. Of course, it was more MMA than kickboxing than back to MMA, but still, when you look at his level of striking, pretty much second to none. Alexander Volkov has a lot of weird intangibles, though, that are going to give Alistair Overeem issues. Overeem doesn't do a great job fighting guys bigger than him. I think the Stipe fight's a good example, because Stipe, if you can keep him at the end of your range constantly, yes, he was able to drop Stipe, but Stipe, when he does let his hands go and when he's landing those good boxing combinations, he was really giving Overeem issues. And Overeem loves to do this one thing that, listen, sometimes he does it and it works, sometimes he does it and it doesn't. I prefer it when he runs. And again, I never thought I'd say that. People hate it because he turns back and runs. When he puts his hands up and his back on the cage, it's very Tyron Woodley-esque. Now, the good thing about Overeem is he's smart enough to where he'll wait in that position, he'll let you throw your 3 or 4 strikes, and then he will get his back off the cage.
A la Augusto Sakai.
Exactly. The issue with that, though, is those 4 or 5 seconds, Augusto Sakai can hit you, he can get some volume off. Alexander Volkov's really, really good at finding his way around your defense, and he's great at going to the body, too, which is something we don't see Overeem deal with all that often. So I'm really curious to see, how does Overeem deal with the body and leg kicks that Alexander Volkov are going to be giving to him?
That's the thing. That's where I was going to go with it. Alexander Volkov, great kicks. Now, they're not the fastest, but this guy's 6'7", and he has an 81-inch reach, and that doesn't take into account, obviously, his leg reach. But this guy is huge, and so to, build momentum and kick quick, it's a little difficult. But for Alexander Volkov, really, really good kicks. And I mean, is it going to be at the same level of Travis Brown when he fought Alistair Overeem? Maybe not, but maybe so. So let's have a look at the odds. Alistair Overeem open to -125 favorite. He's now +152 underdog as an average on best fight odds. For Volkov, open to +105. He's now a -185. Again, at best fight odds. If you have a look at the Tapology picks, 1,331, 63% Overeem, 6% of those fans have him to win by knockout. The 37% that have Volkov, 72% have him to win by knockout. So somebody's probably going to win by knockout. That's what the fans are thinking. To me, this is a really tricky one. And again, you want to go inside baseball. I've been juggling this one around in my head all day, and so have you. In terms of confidence, you talk pop and popcorn, and we've had a fair amount of them on this one, but this is one for me. I like Overeem ever so slightly here. Again, I like the fact that if he's in trouble, run away. Maybe don't turtle up, because turtling never works. This isn't a hockey fight. It works sometimes for Overeem. It really does.
I hate to keep on bringing up the name, but unless you are like a Poirier or like a Masvidal who can turtle up and move their head and counter all in the same motion, it's normally not a good idea to just put your hands up by your head.
Overeem does it pretty good, though. You got to give him that. But I don't love it, especially against a guy like Volkov, who could just back up and start kicking him to the body or throw the uppercuts. But again, what do I like out of Overeem? The power shots, the takedowns, and the fact that when he lands ground and pound, you do not want to be either underneath him or the canvas, because you're going to get beat up if you're the canvas, and he misses on a punch. I'm going Overeem ever so slightly. What are you thinking here?
So I'm going to side with Alexander Volkov. And for full transparency, like you had said, I was pretty confident in Alistair Overeem up until today. But the thing I have with Overeem is that he does tend to get hurt in most of his fights. And he has one of two. He does. Oh, yeah. He's the definition of a glass cannon. But he has two reactions when he gets hit. Sometimes he falls down, and sometimes puts his back against the cage. If he just goes down, that's his best bet in this fight, because Volkov probably won't just follow him to the mat. If he puts his back up against the cage, I hate that position for him so much. And there's sometimes in fights where I feel like I've got a clear view as to what might happen. I can really see Volkov hitting Overeem with a shot as Overeem moves in. Overeem kind of getting wobbled, backing up to the cage, and we see Alexander Volkov with those slow, but also very powerful and long distance uppercuts. Just being able to catch Overeem with his hands up high. I like Volkov. Now, here's the thing, and I think you can agree to this. You picked Overeem, but Overeem can get knocked out in 10 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
I picked Volkov. Volkov can get ankle picked and completely dominated on the ground throughout the whole entirety of this fight. So I'm going to pick Volkov. I'll even say by stoppage, but this really is a coin flip of a fight.
I like Overeem in this one. You've got Volkov. Matt, this was a great card. I had a lot of fun going back through, doing the research, making the videos for this one. If you want to check out, we have question mark kicks on Saturday, 2 hours before the prelims. We go through our final picks. Maybe we weren't overly confident in one here. We'll let you know what we're thinking by the end of the week after the weigh-ins. Dariush has missed weight in his last one. CDF had missed weight, so you got to watch out what's going to happen there. Make sure you check us out, FightNightPicks.com. All kinds of new merch, the new Under Armour Fight Night Picks shirt.
Stuff.
We got hats. We got all kinds of great stuff. I ship them out as quick as possible. You can find us on iTunes and Spotify for the shows that we have here on YouTube, as well as a podcast of the picks. Just look at Fight Night Picks. And Matt, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Fight Night Picks, all kinds of good stuff over there, and some stuff that you might not see on YouTube or in the podcast. So, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say,
let's get into it.